Welcome back to my channel. Please leave a comment letting me know where in the world you are watching from, and do not forget to like, share, and subscribe. Enjoy the video. I met Madison at a friend's engagement party, one of those gatherings where you only recognize three people, all engrossed in slow dances or hushed conversations carried on in slightly elevated voices. I was lurking near the punch bowl, feigning interest in baby photos tacked to the refrigerator, when she appeared behind me and quipped, "Wow, you have really found the loneliest corner." I turned. She held a glass of white wine and wore lipstick the color of rust. Her smile was a mischievous curve, as if she perpetually teetered on the brink of uttering something that would either irrevocably alter my life or make my entire day. "I am just pretending to care about someone else's toddler," I confessed. "You are doing a great job," she replied. Very convincing. I laughed. She introduced herself Madison. I repeated her name, savoring the sound, as if testing it out on my tongue. She remained at my side for the remainder of the evening. We talked endlessly, covering a vast array of topics: the absurdity of wedding hashtags, our shared aversion to horses, her brief but intensely memorable summer job as a birthday clown. She possessed a captivating magnetism, a quality uniquely inherent to individuals who are utterly unconcerned with others' opinions. As I departed that night, I had her number saved in my phone under Clown Girl. I rectified that the following day. We began texting incessantly. Her messages were electrifying rapid-fire, unfiltered streams of consciousness, punctuated by random thoughts, bizarre top-tops, and photographs of pastries that, in her words, looked too smug for their own good. I never knew what to expect next, a thrilling uncertainty that I wholeheartedly embraced. Our first official date took place at a bar that had previously served as a church. We settled into a booth beneath stained glass windows and ordered cocktails with names like Sin or Sangria. She wore a silver snake ring and requested fries with extra aioli. We discussed our ex's disastrous first dates and the most egregious things we would ever done for attention. Hers involved faking a foreign accent for an entire week of high school. Mine entailed joining an improv troupe in college to impress a girl who transferred schools 2 weeks later. "God, that is tragic," she said, gently touching her hand to mine. We kissed outside the bar. Her lips tasted of ginger and gin. The subsequent weeks were a whirlwind of late-night strolls, rooftop wine sipping, and sticky fingers at farmers' markets. She possessed a remarkable ability to transform every shared experience into a cinematic scene, not the central plot, but rather a quieter, more understated subplot, a narrative twist you never anticipated but found yourself unexpectedly cherishing. She would send texts like, "Your face is stuck in my brain like a song I can't Shazam," or, "Do you ever feel like everyone else got the instruction manual and we're just winging it with duct tape and good vibes?" I did not vocalize it, but I was falling not in a melodramatic, movie montage kind of way, but in a slow, steady, reassuring manner. The kind where you begin envisioning your partner brushing their teeth in your bathroom. The kind where you meticulously save their voice notes and replay them when insomnia strikes. She made me feel truly seen, like I was not merely a background character, but someone of genuine importance. Looking back, I believe she was always observing me with an intensity that bordered on unnerving. As if meticulously memorizing lines for a role she had not yet decided whether to accept. The first fissure in our relationship appeared one evening at a party. She would invited me to her friend's birthday celebration. It was a large gathering, brimming with boisterous music and individuals adorned in thrifted attire that somehow managed to appear effortlessly stylish. I was in the kitchen, nursing a beer and attempting to discern whether the hummus was homemade, when I overheard a conversation. Two of her friends, slightly intoxicated and engaged in animated laughter, were whispering. "I can't believe she is still playing along," one said. "Honestly, I did not think she would last this long," the other responded. Then, as if delivering a punchline, "And look at him. They did not see me. Or perhaps they did, and their lack of concern was even more unsettling." I discreetly withdrew before I could overhear anything further. I located Madison on the balcony, laughing with someone in a velvet blazer. I requested that she leave with me. She complied without hesitation. We did not discuss the incident that night. I convinced myself that I was being overly paranoid, that their comments pertained to someone else entirely, that I did not want to be the kind of person who manufactures drama from inconsequential background noise. However, that initial crack remained a persistent, unsettling fracture. A few days later, I broached the subject. We were at her apartment, eating ramen on the floor in front of her television. Your friend said something odd at the party. I began. She paused mid-slurp. I relayed what I would overheard. She blinked, then offered a smile. You think they were talking about you? I shrugged. It certainly sounded that way. She laughed. You are being overly sensitive. They were talking about Carter. He is dating a girl he met in a parking lot. I nodded, attempting to believe her, desperately wanting to. But something about her delivery, too smooth, too readily prepared, felt unsettlingly off. Things did not immediately unravel. We continued seeing each other, kissing, sharing silly jokes and lengthy anecdotes, enjoying mornings where she made pancakes that were slightly burned on one side. However, I sensed a subtle shift, a subtle unraveling, as if I had lost a narrative thread, and she was holding it just beyond my grasp. The truth emerged during an argument I had not realized we were even having. We were on her couch. She was scrolling through Instagram. I was trying to guess the movie she would selected based on the opening music. She tossed her phone aside. You have been weird lately, she stated. You have been distant, I countered. You are being dramatic, she retorted. Are you with me or not? I pressed. She rolled her eyes. God, you're really falling for this. Huh? I froze. Excuse me. She stood up, beginning to pace. This was not supposed to be serious. I remained seated, my heart pounding. She continued, her voice betraying a newfound urgency. It was a joke at first, a bet. What kind of bet? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. She avoided my gaze. Just a stupid thing. My friend dared me to see if I could get someone to say, I love you in under a month. A long, heavy silence hung in the air. Finally, she looked at me. You were just easy to talk to. It became real. I did not mean for it to. I rose slowly to my feet. So, I am the punchline. No, she said, you are just not the plan. I left. She did not attempt to stop me. I did not cry until 2 days later, standing in my shower, my hands braced against the tile as if trying to hold up the entire apartment building. It was not merely the lie, it was a rewinding, a replaying of every shared moment, every compliment, every kiss, attempting to discern what was genuine and what was meticulously crafted deception. I struggled to recall a single instance where she would look at me without a calculated glint in her eyes. She texted me a week later. I am sorry. I messed up, but I was not faking all of it. I did not respond. It is irrelevant whether some aspects were genuine when the foundation of the relationship was a cruel jest. You cannot construct trust upon a dare. Months have passed. I have dated casually since then, nothing serious. I have become slower, more cautious, less inclined to equate charm with sincerity. I still think about her sometimes, not with anger, but with a colder emotion, a numb disappointment. She was the kind of person who could make you feel like the protagonist of a captivating narrative, only to realize you were merely a fleeting character in the trailer. Entry 1. February 3rd first date with Ethan tonight. Met on Hinge. His profile was surprisingly forthright, complete sentences, proper punctuation, even a book quote that was not Murakami. Trust is a residue of promises kept someone named Frank Navisky. I Googled it. It is not even a real quote. Still, I liked the vibe. We met at a small wine bar near my apartment. He arrived early, wearing a sweater that appeared expensive but not ostentatious. His laughter surprised me, genuine, warm. He did not engage in the usual barrage of questions. Instead, He asked me what I would recently change my mind about. I told him I had not considered wanting children until last year. He did not flinch, simply stating that it was a significant shift. What caused it, I appreciated that. We lingered for hours, sharing a cheese plate. He walked me home, refraining from a kiss, simply hugging me and saying, "Let us keep doing this." Entry 2, February 9th. Third date. He brought me a book I would mention enjoying in high school, The Bell Jar. Yes, I am basic no. I do not care. Inside was a note we can't protect ourselves from pain, but we can choose who we let see it. Who says that on a third date? But still, it eased something in my chest. We talked about fear, trust, and how people claim to desire honesty, but truly crave compatibility disguised as courage. He shared that he had been cheated on years ago, and that it fundamentally altered his approach to relationships. He stated it without bitterness, simply as a fact he would learn to carry. I confess that I would never cheated, but had certainly made emotional exits before, physical ones. He responded that this still constituted a form of betrayal. I did not argue he was not wrong. Entry 3, February 14th. Valentine's Day, he mentioned that he does not observe Hallmark holidays, but he still appeared at my door with a thermos of hot chocolate and a playlist titled Warm Inside. We sat on my couch, watching half of a documentary about Icelandic architecture, and somehow fell asleep holding hands. He listens as if taking notes. No, that is not quite right. He listens as if he already knows what I am going to say and is simply confirming it. Entry 4, February 20th, something small, maybe nothing. I received a strange Instagram message from a new account, no profile picture. Just a direct message, "Do you think Ethan tells everyone the same things?" I deleted it. It was likely a bot or a troll, but it lingered in my mind. Later, I casually asked him if any of his exes were unhinged enough to send cryptic messages. He smiled. I have had people who did not want to let go, but nothing recent. I wanted to ask more, but I did not. We watched a movie and fell asleep again. This time, he stayed until morning. Entry 5, March 2nd, okay. I am writing this down because I feel crazy. I matched with someone on a dating app. Not seriously. I was not even planning to swipe that night. Mostly boredom. I have been exclusive with Ethan for weeks, but I open the app and suddenly there is this guy. Cody, with a face that looks eerily familiar. Same jawline, same hair, same city, different name. I clicked through. There were only 2 pictures. The profile was vague, but something felt off. I messaged him, half jokingly, "Hey, you look like someone I am already dating." He replied, "Maybe you are being tested," then unmatched. My hands were shaking. I called Ethan. He did not answer. He texted 5 minutes later, "Can we talk tomorrow in Person Entry 6. March 3rd. I do not even know how to process today. He came over as calm as ever. Sat on my couch. Same posture, same tone. And then he said, "I created a second profile to see how you would react." I laughed because I thought he was joking. He was not. He said it was a loyalty test he would read about in a psychology forum, that people often say they are monogamous but do not act like it when no one's watching. He said, "You passed. That should feel good." I asked him if he thought that made it okay. He shrugged. I needed to know before I got in too deep. I have learned the hard way. I said something I do not even remember what, and he just kept repeating. It was not personal, but it was because I would told him things about my family, my fears, my past. I would let him into the softest parts of me, and he would use that access to build a trap. I asked him to leave. He did. No drama, just a nod. Before he walked out, he said, "This does not mean I do not care about you. It means I care enough to verify." Entry 7, March 7th. I have not heard from him since. I keep going over our conversations, trying to find the cracks, the clues, but he was so careful, so curated. I do not know what is more upsetting, the betrayal or the fact that he never really became anything in my memory. He was always observing, never unfolding. He apologized once via text, "I know you feel hurt," but I was trying to protect myself. I did not respond. Entry 8. March 11th. What does it mean when someone tests your loyalty instead of building trust? It means they want proof, not partnership. It means they are still living in someone else's betrayal. It means they are not dating you, they are dating their fear. And I am not a litmus strip. I am not an experiment. Entry 9. April 1st, I saw him today at a bookstore. He did not see me. He was standing in the psychology section, flipping through a book with a yellow cover. I watched him for a minute. He looked exactly the same, still composed, still curious. I turned and left before he could see me. I do not miss him, not exactly, but I missed a version of him I thought was real. Entry 10. April 10th, I have started dating again, slowly, softly. I am more cautious now, but not in the way Ethan was. I am not testing anyone. I am just listening harder, asking better questions. And when someone tells me they trust me, I ask if they're willing to show that trust, not just demand it from me. Some people are, some are not. But at least now I know what I am looking for, not perfection, not proof, just presence. And someone who sees me as a person, not a puzzle to solve or a variable to control. I deserve that. We all do. She would ask for my birth time before even inquiring about my last name. We matched on a dating app. Her name was Stella. Her profile was a whirlwind of sun-drenched selfies, annotated star maps, and a prompt answer that read, "I am not saying astrology is a science, but I am saying I won't date a Virgo rising again." I almost swiped left, but something in her smile stopped me. It was not soft, it was sharp, as if she knew something I did not, and she was not going to reveal it unless I earned it. Our first conversation unfolded as follows. Her, "Hey, what is your big three?" Me, I do not know what that means. Her sun, moon, rising, birth date, time, and place. I will do your chart. Me, should not we get a drink first? Her, I need to know if you will ruin my life first. I laughed, providing her with the necessary details. She replied 20 minutes later with a screenshot of my birth chart: Pisces sun, Capricorn moon, Leo rising, emotional sponge, emotionally repressed, attention seeking, delicious. I texted back, "That is a lot of contradiction." She said, "That is what makes you interesting." She was right. Our first date was at a speakeasy concealed behind a laundromat. She wore a leather jacket over a silk slip dress and ordered a mezcal without glancing at the menu. She smelled of bergamot and recklessness. Within 10 minutes, she had my undivided attention. She spoke rapidly, interrupting herself, employing terms like transit, stellium, and natal wound with the fluency of someone conversing in an entirely different language. She revealed that she was a Gemini sun, Scorpio moon, Virgo rising. "I contain multitudes," she declared, sipping her drink, "and I am very organized about them." I confess that I appreciated her lack of pretense. "Chill is just avoidance dressed up in linen," she smiled. I fell slightly in love with her right then and there. She was unlike anyone I would ever dated. She did not merely inquire about my past, she probed how my Saturn return had influenced my decisions. She did not simply observe my patterns, she mapped them against lunar cycles. Initially, I found it charming, quirky, similar to people obsessed with Myers-Briggs or Enneagram types. A lens, not a law. But with her, it was a doctrine. She would make pronouncements like, "You are pulling away, classic Pisces sun, under stress." Or, "This fight is textbook Mars in Cancer behavior." And I would laugh, assuming it was metaphorical. But over time, it became evident that she was not joking. She was not interpreting my actions, she was predicting them. 2 weeks into our relationship, we were sitting on my couch, knees touching, when she produced a small leather notebook and began sketching. "What is that?" I asked. She did not look up. "Your Venus placement is sextiling my Jupiter this week. I think we should see how that plays out." I blinked. See how it plays out. She tore out the paper, folded it, and tucked it into my hoodie pocket. Just be yourself, she instructed. This is field work. I laughed. Are you studying me? She met my gaze directly. I am studying what happens when Gemini and Pisces push past their incompatibility. I waited for the punchline. It never came. That night, after she departed, I unfolded the note. It was a hand-drawn chart. My name at the center, arrows pointing to various traits. One read, emotionally porous but seeks structure. Another needs reassurance but hides it behind humor. I was not sure whether to be flattered or deeply unsettled. I kept the note in my nightstand. The sex was exceptional, better than exceptional. She enjoyed control but was not rigid. She would ask questions mid-act, whispering observations into my neck. You are so responsive, that is your Pisces sun. Your hands are very Capricorn moon. It was the first time I would ever been astrologically dissected during oral sex. She made me feel desired, studied, as if I were worth mapping. It was not until later that I began to feel like I was being exploited. The cracks started subtly. I would suggest a planned dinner, perhaps a last-minute trip, and she would respond, "That is not a good idea, Mercury's in retrograde." I would attempt to discuss something meaningful, my brother's divorce, my fear becoming like my father, and she would steer the conversation toward my fourth house placements. One evening, I confess that I felt disconnected, unsure she truly saw me beyond what the stars revealed. She smiled gently. "I see you more clearly than you see yourself." I believed her. That is what terrifies me now. A few weeks later, I met one of her friends, Chloe, a soft-spoken artist who offered me a joint and asked if I cried during Pixar movies. We were sitting on a balcony, drinking wine from mismatched mugs. Chloe inquired, "So, you are part of the experiment?" I froze. "What experiment?" She glanced at her friend, who gave her a sharp look. Stella laughed awkwardly. "Oh, maybe you have not been told." She stood. "We are out of wine." She went inside. Chloe leaned in. "It is not shady. She is just trying to rewrite her dating patterns. You are part of the incompatible phase." "Incompatible?" I asked. Chloe nodded. "She is dating signs she is astrologically opposed to see what she can learn. You are her first Pisces." I felt intensely cold. Later that night, I calmly, quietly asked her if it was true. She did not deny it. "Why did not you tell me?" I asked. She shrugged. "Would you have agreed to it?" I did not answer. She sat beside me, legs tucked under her like a cat. "You are not a lab rat. I like you. I am just trying to understand what makes connection happen, even when everything says it should not. You reduce me to a data point," I said. She looked genuinely confused. "I did not reduce you. I chose you. That is different." I lacked the energy to explain how profoundly wrong that was. We did not break up immediately. I wanted to believe that I was more than a chart, that I mattered beyond my placements. But the illusion was shattered. Every compliment felt coded, every touch felt observed. I began to wonder if she was taking notes after I left, if every shared moment was being meticulously filed away under Pisces' high empathy, low boundaries. One night, I discovered a document open on her laptop Gemini sun, dating log incompatibility trials. My name was at the top of a column labeled mutable water. I closed the laptop and left without waking her. I did not return. She texted me the next day, "I am sorry you feel used. That was not my intention." I wrote back, "You did not date me, you studied me." She did not reply. 6 months have passed. I still receive horoscope emails, though I never subscribed. Sometimes I read them, wondering if they would mention betrayal or misplaced trust. They never do. I have begun to define myself outside of my birth chart. It turns out I am more than my moon sign. I still believe in patterns, energies, and the inexplicable ways people connect. But I also believe this: you cannot love someone through a filter and call it fate. Love is not about compatibility, it is about presence. And I deserve to be seen without a telescope. Travis, that was his name. And guess where we met? On a dating site, obviously. You laugh from the hips, he said, grinning. That is rare. I smiled. I wanted to believe I was rare. He was the kind of man who remembered things that I preferred oat milk in my coffee, that I always ordered fries even when I swore I would not, that I detested the sound of metal scraping against ceramic. He would send me songs that mirrored my mood, recommend podcasts based on single comments I would made. He used words like attunement and resonance, and I did not even cringe. He brought me a playlist on our second date, literally handwritten on a card with the Spotify link scrawled underneath. Songs that sound like you. The first track was Phoebe Bridgers, followed by Bon Iver. I told him I loved it, that it felt like someone had finally translated my thoughts into music. He said, "You are easy to read in the best way." At the time, that felt like intimacy now. It feels like a red flag I mistook for poetry. We dated for 2 months, not long, not short. Enough to weave into each other's routines. Enough to feel real. He took me to the same cafe every Sunday morning. The barista knew our order by the 3rd week. He would text me good morning with a line from a poem and good night with a voice note that usually included a sigh and the words, "I like this us." He made me feel like I was the only one he would ever said those things to, until I found out I was not. It started with a direct message from a stranger. Her name was Emily. She sent me a screenshot of Travis's Hinge profile. "Hey," she wrote, "sorry to be weird. I think we might be dating the same guy." I stared at the screen for a full minute before responding. We compared notes. Same Sunday cafe, same playlist, different title, same compliments, same voice notes literally. She sent me one, and I played it alongside mine. Same sigh, same cadence, same script. "I feel sick," she said. I thought I was being paranoid, but then he called me Sugar Bones. Has he ever said that to you? He had twice. I thought it was his nickname for apparently. It was just part of the package. Over the following week, I connected with 3 other women. All of us had been dating him within the same 3-month period. We had all been told we were special, unique, someone he truly connected with on a profound level. We had all received personalized playlists, handwritten cards, small gestures designed to feel deeply personal and meaningful, yet clearly replicated. A carefully crafted performance repeated with slight variations. He was dating us like a franchise operation. The same script, different city. I confronted him. I did not yell. I did not cry. I simply asked him how many. He looked at me with that same warm, disarming smile, the one that had initially captivated me. The smile I now recognize as a carefully constructed part of his persona, a key element of his meticulously crafted routine. I did not lie. He responded, maintaining that charming facade. "I never said I was exclusive. But you said I was different," I countered, my voice steady despite the churning in my gut. He shrugged, his nonchalance infuriating. "You are. They are too. I like people. I connect easily." "That is not connection," I retorted, the word sharper now. "That is choreography. A meticulously planned performance." He tilted his head, a slight furrow in his brow, feigning confusion. What is wrong with making people feel good? I stared at him, the realization settling heavily in my chest, because it is not real. You are not truly invested. You are performing a role. You are dispensing intimacy like party favors, handing out carefully curated experiences as if they hold some intrinsic value. He remained silent, his expression unchanged. I left. He did not try to stop me. Later, the women he had been simultaneously dating, we started a group chat. We called ourselves the Playlist Club. We compared notes, shared our stories, laughed together, mourned the loss of the illusion, even rewriting his messages as humorous fanfiction. We even joked about holding a reunion and inviting him as a guest speaker, a darkly humorous idea born out of our shared experience. It sounded like revenge, but it was not. It was a reclaiming of our agency, a collective act of defiance against the manipulation we'd all experienced. I still see his name pop up occasionally. A mutual friend likes his post, or someone tags him in a photo. He is still smiling, still charming, that same carefully constructed persona fully intact. I wonder how many women he is currently connecting with. The strangest part, I do not hate him. I think he genuinely believes he is giving something, providing a valuable experience, but he is not. He is simply pressing play on a pre-recorded script, repeatedly repeating the same performance, believing his own carefully crafted illusion. I have cautiously started dating again. I do not need the poetic gestures anymore, the personalized playlists, the elaborate rituals, the nicknames lifted from some vintage novel. I just want someone who shows up authentically, without a script, without a sigh, someone real. Even if it is messy, especially if it is messy, because I am not looking for someone who knows how to say the right thing. I am looking for someone who means it. Morgan smelled of cedarwood and wine. The initial attraction was not solely the kiss, not entirely. It was the anticipation, the 2 weeks of flirtatious texts, long phone calls, and voice notes that felt like secrets whispered across a screen. It was the way she spoke about books with such reverence, the way she elevated the simple act of ordering takeout into a moral decision. It was the way she posed questions that felt deeply personal and insightful. Like, what part of yourself are you still afraid to write about? We met at a reading for an independent literary journal, neither of us having been published in it yet. She was seated in the back row, legs crossed at the ankles, a notebook open on her lap. I noticed her before she noticed me. She laughed a little too loudly at a line that was not particularly funny, and I immediately knew I liked her. Afterward, I complimented her boots. They make me taller and less emotionally available. She quipped, her eyes twinkling with amusement. They're failing at one of those things, I replied. Her eyes crinkled at the corners. You are trouble, she said. Only if you are writing about me, I retorted. Little did I know she would be. Our first date was a creative explosion. We did not just talk, we engaged in a vibrant exchange of ideas, a spontaneous and exhilarating interplay of intellect and emotion. We layered metaphors over memories, spun stories from shared glances, sketching out imaginary lives we would never live but felt compelled to explore. She asked if I would ever written something I did not want anyone to read. I said yes. Then it is probably the only honest thing you have written. She responded, her words striking a chord. We slept together that night. It was not rushed or performative. It was a deeply intimate physical connection, a shared exploration of trust and vulnerability, where bodies communicated as freely and effortlessly as words. Her breath caught when I kissed her collarbone. She pulled my hair when I kissed her thighs. We did not say much afterward. Comfortable silence as she comforted to me, finding solace and belonging in my arms. In the morning, she stole my hoodie and half my croissants. As she left, she kissed my neck and said, "You are a good story." I took it as a compliment. We fell into a rhythm that felt intoxicating. She would arrive late at night, barefoot, bearing wine and ideas. I would cook dinner while she danced around my kitchen, reading aloud from essays. She was workshopping. Sometimes we worked side by side, laptops open, legs tangled, trading lines, headlines, and edits like currency, our creative energies intertwining and inspiring one another. She once asked if she could read my journal, not aloud, but silently. I hesitated, then handed it to her. She read 5 pages, then pressed her palm to her heart. "You write like you are bleeding on purpose," she whispered, her voice a mixture of awe and concern. I did not know whether to interpret it as praise or apprehension, but I let her continue reading. She was magnetic, possessing a captivating allure that made it easy to ignore my better judgment. I told her things I would never share with anyone about my father's silence, my compulsive need to be chosen, the time I almost abandoned writing because I feared my creativity was depleted. She listened as though everything I said was pure gold, her attention unwavering, her empathy profound. She would curl next to me after sex and ask questions like, if you could write a story that no one could trace back to you, but it was your truth, would you still publish it? I said, yes. She said, me too. I did not realize then that she meant my truth. The first time I saw my words in her work, I dismissed it as coincidence. A caption under one of her Instagram poems mirrored a conversation we would had over wine a week earlier, discussing my ex and how she treated my openness as a mere tool. I commented, beautiful line. She replied with a winking emoji, nothing more. I brushed it off. Writers inevitably influence each other. It is the nature of intimacy and shared. Inspiration, right? But it kept happening. Snippets of conversations, phrases I would said during intimate moments, stories I would share in confidence all began appearing in her essays, her captions, her spoken word performances. She offered no context, no credit, simply transplanting them into her work, polished and reframed, transforming my personal experiences into her own literary creations. One line in particular felt like a gut punch. He told me he was afraid of being ordinary, so he became performatively broken. I would said that after a fight with my brother. I remember the room, the light, the wine, the way she nodded and said, that is a hell of a sentence. Now it was hers, claimed, branded, and utterly devoid of my presence, my authorship. I confronted her one night. We were tangled in my sheets, the room still warm with the remnant of passion and the scent of lemon candle wax. Can I ask you something without you getting defensive? I began. That is never a good start. She replied, already on the defensive. Are you using my stories in your work? I asked, my voice low, careful. She did not deny it, simply shrugging. Writers are thieves. You knew that. I sat up, my words sharper now. There's a difference between being inspired by someone and extracting them. She pulled the blanket over her chest. You never said it was off limits. I stared at her, the weight of her words sinking in. Is that how this works? If I do not explicitly say, do not steal this, it is fair game. She looked at me as though I was being overly precious, overly sensitive. You are a writer. I thought you would understand. I did understand. That was the problem. I stopped seeing her after that. Not dramatically, no explosive confrontation, just a slow, gradual fading, less texting, more silence, a goodbye that never actually happened. She did not pursue me, and perhaps that is what hurt the most. 3 months later, she published an essay. It went viral, shared by literary accounts, quoted in captions, featured in a small but influential digital magazine that rewarded its writers with exposure and social media clout. The essay was about a man, but I saw myself in every paragraph. She described his apartment in detailed books, stacked like altars, a record player that spun only sad women's music, a kitchen that smelled of burnt garlic and hope. And I knew it was mine. She described our first date, our first kiss, our first fight, reframing them into something more dramatic, more compelling than the reality. She depicted his sadness as if it were an animal she would tamed and controlled. Then she concluded with a line, I will never forget, I did not fall for him. I fell for the way he let me shape his story. I did not message her. I did not comment. I simply closed the tab and sat with a dull, persistent ache of being reduced to mere material, a source of creative inspiration. Nothing more. It was not just a betrayal, it was the realization that for her, connection was a transaction. She did not love me, she loved what I gave her access to my pain, my process, my words. She had not seen me as a partner. She would see me as content, as raw material to be mined and molded into her own literary masterpiece. I still write about her sometimes, not directly, not by name, but I write about the feeling of being known only in fragments, of being loved for one's language but not one's silence, of being curated instead of cherished. I write about the danger of inviting someone into the sacred spaces of your life and watching them transform your vulnerability into a public spectacle. I write because that is how I reclaim the pieces, how I wrest back control of the narrative. Because if I do not write it, she still owns the ending. These days, I guard my creative process like it is a vein of gold, not because I am bitter, but because I have learned that some people do not want to create with you, they want to feed off you. They crave the intimacy of your ideas without the effort of building something real. So I choose more carefully now not just who I share my body with, but who I share the inside of my mind with. Because the stories I carry, they are not just stories, they are me. And I deserve more than to be a footnote in someone else's masterpiece. Spencer asked if he could take notes. The first night we met, at a publisher's after-party cheap wine, flattering lighting, everyone pretended to like each other more than they actually did. He was wearing a dark sweater and corduroy pants with a strategically placed rip at the knee. He held his glass like it was a prop, asking questions that stopped conversations mid-sentence. He turned to me after overhearing a comment I made about how loneliness is not always loud. "Say that again," he said, "but slower." I laughed. "Why?" He tapped his phone. "I collect lines like that. Do not worry. I will attribute it." I thought he was joking. He was not, but I was flattered nonetheless. I repeated the line, word for word. I should have known then. Spencer was the first man I would dated in years who seemed genuinely interested in my inner life. He asked questions like, "What is the hardest truth you've had to carry alone, and which ghost still sleeps in your bed when no one else is there?" He listened like a writer, attentively, his head tilted slightly, as if making space for the shape of my words. He told me he was working on a collection of essays, a meditation on intimacy in the digital age. "That sounds vague enough to be published." I quipped. He laughed. "I like to keep the pitch blurry. The heart of it is personal." I should have asked who's personal. We began spending nights together first at his place. Books stacked against the walls, a coffee table made of milk crates, a mattress on the floor, a carefully curated aesthetic of intentional struggle, even though his Substack had 30,000 subscribers. He read to me in bed James Baldwin, Carson McCullers, and excerpts from his own drafts. He would pause occasionally, asking, "Too precious?" Or, "Does that sound like I'm trying too hard?" I love that he let me in, that he shares vulnerabilities, his creative process with me. I thought it meant trust. I started sharing my own stories quietly at first, then with increasing courage experiences I had not yet written about, things I had not even spoken aloud before. The time my mother stopped speaking to me for 6 months. The relationship that imploded because I could not say I am sorry until it was too late. My complex relationship with silence, with shame, with being seen. He asked permission to write down my words. I always said yes. I believed it was ours. The first time I saw myself in one of his essays, I did not immediately recognize it as my own story. It was published on a mid-tier literary website. The title was something pretentious, yet familiar to women who teach us how to bleed beautifully. I read it in bed, smiling at lines that felt intimately are the metaphor about ghosts, a joke I would make about arranging my books by mood rather than genre, an entire paragraph that mirrored a conversation we would had while walking home from dinner in the rain. I texted him, "Hey, this is beautiful." He replied, "You inspired it." I felt proud. Then I reread it, and this time I noticed something unsettling. He never used the pronoun she. Never said my partner or someone I love. Just a woman, one woman I knew. Not a person, but a device, a symbol. It kept happening. Each new essay, each new post brought a strange sense of déjà vu. Details too precise to be coincidental. Phrases I was spoken now polished and recontextualized. My words stripped of their original meaning and transformed to fit his narrative. Once, he wrote about a woman who feared being ordinary, so deeply she performed empathy as a ritual. I would say those exact words to him about myself after a night of crying in his arms. He would kiss my forehead and then filed it away. I asked him about it. "Are you writing about me?" He did not deny it. "I am writing through you," he said. I asked if he could at least warn me. Let me read the pieces before they went live. He said that would compromise the integrity of the work. What about the integrity of me? I asked. He smiled, as though I was being sentimental. "You said I could use your stories." I had. But I had not said he could make them his own. What hurt was not just the use of my stories, it was the erasure. He never used my name, never acknowledged what we were, never gave shape or credit or intimacy to the real person behind the prose. He turned my vulnerability into metaphor, and then he sold it. Our final unraveling was quiet. He was reading a new piece aloud, workshopping for a reading. It was about a woman who always cried after sex, who never said I love you until it was too late, who collected her pain like souvenirs. I sat across from him, my heart pounding. I would cry after sex twice with him. The second time, I would told him I was afraid. He had not really seen me. In the story, the woman says, "I think you only want me for the way I break." In the story, the man replies, "I want you for the way you still believe." He looked up from the page. "Too much. Did you write that for me or about me?" I asked. "Does it matter?" He replied. I stood up. "It does to me." He looked confused, as though I would miss the point. "You are not the only one who has ever cried after sex," he said. I did not reply. He returned to his notebook. I left that night with my toothbrush and a pair of socks that were not mine. He did not call. 2 weeks later, the essay was published. It went viral. People praise its tenderness, its insight into the female psyche, its masterful portrayal of a woman. They all seemed to know. No one asked if she would give him permission. I started writing again essays of my own, but not about him. Not yet. I wrote about consent in storytelling, about the ethics of inspiration, about how easy it is for men to mine women for their most intimate truths and walk away with the credit, the applause, the narrative. I did not name him because I did not need to, because this was not about revenge, it was about reclamation. These days, I hesitate when someone calls me a muse. It no longer sounds like a compliment, it sounds like a warning, because I am not a metaphor. I am not your essay. I am not the scaffolding for your self-discovery. I am a person, not content. And if you want to write about me, really write about me, then you damn well better write to me first. It was late September when I met Silas, not the crisp, golden kind of September, where the leaves look like they are posing for Instagram, but the kind where everything feels like it has been sitting in lukewarm water too long. The air was thick and heavy, the morning starting cool, but the midday sun punishing us for hoping summer was over. I was swiping through dating apps partly because I could not sleep, partly because I made a vague promise to myself to say yes more often. It sounded brave in theory and practice. It mostly meant agreeing to things I would normally roll my eyes at, like online dating. Silas's profile was oddly curated, not in a bad way, just deliberate. A few black and white photos, one of him sitting at a cafe table with a book I pretended to have read, another of him on a hiking trail, arms crossed as though daring you to dislike nature. His smile was small, private. His profile stated that he worked in architecture, loved thunderstorms, and enjoyed red wine, a combination that made me cringe slightly. It felt too perfectly constructed, like a dating profile Mad Lib. But I swiped right anyway. We matched within minutes. The conversation started stiffly. He called me intriguing, making me feel like a puzzle to be solved. But we found a rhythm when we started discussing movie endings. His favorite was Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind was The Social Network, not because it ended well, but because of its chilling coldness. "That is kind of dark," he said. "Exactly," I replied. Our first date was at a tapas place that always smelled faintly of burnt mango. He arrived wearing a soft brown sweater and jeans that fit a little too perfectly to be casual. His voice was smooth, the kind that could make crime statistics sound like a bedtime story. His questions were not the typical first date fare, what I did for work, where I grew up. He wanted to know about my past relationships, framing his curiosity as an interest in how people heal. And in the dim candlelight, it almost sounded sincere. There was something about the way he tilted his head when I spoke, as if I was offering him something delicate that he did not want to drop. After dinner, we did not say goodbye immediately. We wandered through the neighborhood. stopping at a bakery that was still open, the kind that sells cookies the size of your face. I remember brushing crumbs off my chest as he walked close beside me, not touching, but near enough that I could feel the warmth of his arm. He looked down at me and said, "You have this low laugh." I smiled, but the truth was, I do not. 2 nights later, we saw each other again. He would text her that morning, saying, "Can't stop thinking about that smile." Half of me was flattered, the other half suspicious. He invited me to his place for dinner. He lived on the top floor of an old building with no elevator, the hallway smelling faintly of paint and popcorn. His apartment was cold and minimalist, as if someone had Googled masculine interior aesthetic and bought everything on the first page of results: black couch, white walls, gray rug. There were no pictures, no knickknacks, even the books on the shelf looked untouched, except for 3 identical copies of a novel I would never heard of. When I asked him why, he said, "It is that important to me," offering no further explanation. I did not press him. We sat on his couch, our knees brushing. He poured us wine, of course, and put on a playlist that sounded as though every song had been carefully selected to appear effortless. We talked about family, about fear, about whether we believed people changed or simply revealed more of who they would always been. At one point, he touched my wrist, tracing the edge of my bracelet with his fingertip. "You always wear this?" he asked. I looked down. I was not wearing a bracelet. "No," I said. He smiled, as if I would said something clever. Later that night, we kissed. It was not rushed or frantic, it was slow, as if he was memorizing something. His hands were warm on my face, gentle but deliberate. There was a fleeting moment where I thought I could fall into this, lose myself in him. But then he pulled back, looked into my eyes, and said, "You would look incredible with red hair." I laughed. "What, like in middle school?" He shrugged. "Just curious. I think it would suit you." The next time we met, he brought me a scarf deep green, not my color, not even close. But I wore it out of politeness. He smiled, as if I would pass some kind of test. That smile, it was not joy, it was satisfaction, like a sculptor admiring his clay mid-creation. By our 5th or 6th date, things started to feel off. We were in a bookstore's idea, and he pointed out a girl with red hair near the fiction section. "She looks like Rebecca," he said. I asked who Rebecca was. He paused, a little too long. "My ex." That was the moment everything clicked. The red hair, the bracelet, the scarf, all the compliments that did not quite fit. He was not seeing me, he was trying to summon someone else, using me as the base material. I did not say anything that night, but from that point on, I started noticing how he watched me not like someone in love, but like someone checking a blueprint. Every time I tried to steer the conversation towards something light and fun childhood memories, bizarre dreams, he pulled it back to identity, core truths, the architecture of the self, as he called it. It all came to a head tonight. He walked me home. It was cold and quiet, the kind of silence that feels like a challenge. He stood on my doorstep, arms crossed, rocking slightly on his heels. Then he leaned in, hugged me too tightly, and whispered, "Just one kiss." I pulled back, not sharply, just firmly. He froze, then stepped away, pretending he had not asked. "Good night," I said, and shut the door. I stood there for a while, my forehead resting against the wood. My heart was not racing, it just ached, as if the veneer had cracked and something bitter had seeped in. That night, I could not sleep. I kept waking up every hour, checking my phone even though it had not buzzed. Then, at 307 a.m., Silas called. I did not answer. He called again and again. After the third call, a text popped up, "Look outside." I cautiously opened the curtain. He was standing across the street, in the middle of the road, holding his phone aloft like it was. His microphone sang. Not shouted, not dramatically, just a soft, lullaby-like hum. I couldn't decipher the lyrics, but the melody was slow, haunting, and off-key in a way that churned my stomach. I didn't open the window. I didn't text him back. I called the police. provided his name and a description visible from my window. He didn't run, didn't hide, he simply stood there, singing as if it were the final scene of a movie, only he understood. The officers arrived 10 minutes later. One approached him, said something, and he simply nodded, getting into their car. No resistance, no anger, just an unnerving calm. Afterward, I blocked him. Phone, social media, everything. I even deleted his name from my contacts to avoid ever seeing it again. For days, I felt like I was waiting for the other shoe to drop a message, a letter, something poetic and unhinged. But nothing came, only silence. I confided in a few friends. One, half-jokingly, suggested had been attempting to construct a Frankensteinian version of his ex. And yes, that wasn't far from the truth. When I first met Jacob, I believed him to be the most attentive listener I would ever encounter. We sat beside each other at a friend's dinner party, one of those lengthy, candlelit affairs overflowing with wine and lacking sufficient seating. He introduced himself with a slight smile, mentioning he was a social worker, and then asked what I had been contemplating lately that I had not voiced aloud. It surprised me pleasantly. I confessed I'd been pondering how grief doesn't solely stem from loss, sometimes arising from prolonged residence in an unsuitable environment. He nodded, as if he already understood. We conversed throughout dessert and well into the cleanup process. As I departed, he gently touched my arm, saying, "You seem like someone who has experienced hardship and yet remained kind." I recall blushing. I remember thinking, finally, someone who sees beyond the surface. Our first date was a week later at a quiet cafe, the music too subdued to hide behind. Before we even ordered drinks, he inquired about my family. I recounted my mother's silence, my father's volatile temper, and the years spent learning to occupy less space. He leaned in, elbows resting on the table, his gaze steady. "You have survived a great deal," he remarked. "That is uncommon." Unsure of what to say, I smiled. Afterward, he texted, "I felt honored to hear your story. Not everyone is brave enough to confront their own pain." I reread it twice, perhaps 3 times. It felt like being truly seen, or so I believed. Over the subsequent weeks, our dates followed a predictable pattern. He posed a question always profound, always personal, and I responded. He listened, nodded, occasionally even tearing up. Then he would offer comments like, "You are incredibly self-aware," or "I am captivated by how you have processed your pain." Initially, it felt validating. Years of therapy had been dedicated to articulating my hurts. To have someone not just listen, but genuinely appreciate that seemed rare, precious. But gradually, something felt amiss. I noticed he rarely reciprocated. Inquiries about his childhood yielded the response, "It is complicated," followed by a change of subject. Questions regarding past relationships elicited. I have dated individuals unprepared to confront themselves. He professed a dislike for dwelling on the past, preferring to focus on the present. Thus, the focus always remained on me. I shared stories about my 19-year-old self hospitalized for panic attacks, the friend who ghosted me after confiding in her about childhood trauma, and the man who'd once declared me too emotional for a proper relationship. Each time, Jacob listened as if I were delivering a sermon. "You are so emotionally literate," he would say. "It is unusual to find a woman who has done the work." It started to feel like I was auditioning for something I had not signed up for. One evening, while watching a documentary about addiction, a woman described how her father's absence shaped her early relationships. Jacob turned to me and stated, "That reminds me of what you said about your dad." I nodded. "You know," he continued, "most women with trauma develop exceptional people reading skills. It is a survival mechanism." He presented this as a compliment. I asked, "Is that why you date women like me?" He paused, then offered a sheepish smile. "I have always connected more with women who've experienced hardship. They are more grounded, less entitled, less naive." I stared at him. He did not seem to realize what he had just admitted. Or perhaps he did. That night, a shift occurred. I began paying close attention to his descriptions of past partners, always variations on the same theme. She had not processed her issues. She lacked self-awareness. She desired love but not accountability. I questioned whether he viewed women as individuals or as case studies. A few days later, I encountered one of his friends at a small gathering. She appeared surprised to see me, saying, "Oh, you are the new one." I inquired about her meaning. She laughed. "Jacob always finds the intense ones," she explained. "He says he is drawn to women with emotional depth, which I think is code for trauma." My stomach plummeted. She had not intended to be cruel. She believed she was being friendly, letting me in on a joke. I smiled, excused myself, and went home early. That night, I sat on my couch replaying everything he had said since we met. The flattery, the focus, the way he consistently steered conversations back to my wounds, as if they were the most fascinating aspect of me. I considered how I would never truly laugh with him without first crying, or dance with him in my kitchen, or shared a moment not somehow tethered to pain. Had we even discussed joy, or was I merely a mirror reflecting the part of himself he refused to confront? A week later, I confronted him. We were walking in the park, hand in hand. I stopped, stating, "Jacob, do you like me or do you like my pain?" He seemed startled. "What kind of question is that?" "A serious one," I replied. He frowned. "I like that you are honest, that you do not hide from your past. That is not the same thing." He fell silent. I continued. "You claim to desire connection, yet you only inquire about what broke me. You never ask what healed me. You never ask what I love, what makes me laugh, or what I aspire to build." He looked hurt. "That is not fair," he said. "I have been present with you, present with my pain. I corrected, not with me." He did not respond, merely looking away. "I think you collect trauma," I said. "I think you feel closer to women who've been hurt because it allows you to avoid your own mess. You get to dwell in our pain without ever offering your own." He remained silent. I left him standing under a tree whose name I did not know. He did not call. Months have passed. I have contemplated Jacob more than I care to admit, not because I miss him, but because I am still untangling his impact on me. Flattered and exposed, wanted and diminished, heard but never truly understood. He taught me something I wish I had not had to learn. Not everyone who listens does so for the right reasons. Some listen to understand, some to control, and some just long enough to feel superior. I am more cautious now. I still share, still open up, but I pay closer attention to who is asking and why. Because my story is not an artifact, a test, fuel, or a mirror for someone else's avoidance. It is mine, and I determine who gets to hold it. I first saw her at an open mic night in a repurposed warehouse on the edge of town. The walls were raw brick, the floor scuffed concrete, and the stage illuminated by a single, flickering spotlight. Sipping lukewarm cider, awaiting my friend's performance, she stepped onto the stage. Her name was Cassandra. She did not announce it, simply beginning to recite a poem about discipline, order, and the liberation found in surrender. Her voice was low, steady, and somehow brighter than the spotlight itself. The audience leaned and I was captivated. Afterward, I found her near the back wall, sipping herbal tea from a thermos. "Your words resonated deeply," I said. She turned, smiling as if she would have been expecting me. "Most people do not delve into the second layer," she responded, the meaning of which remained unclear. I wanted to know more. We began seeing each other casually, first poetry readings, then longer walks, then dinners where she barely touched her food, but devoured silence as if it nourished her. She frequently spoke of cleansing the mind and transcending the distractions of the flesh. I initially perceived this as metaphor. Then, one evening, she invited me to a gathering. "It is quiet," she explained. "We discuss purpose, what is worth preserving, and what can be released." I followed her to a small apartment where floor cushions were arranged in a perfect circle. The others greeted me with soft nods. Each wore a lapel pin shaped like an open eye. That first session focused on clarity. Cassandra spoke about detaching from the world's noise, about how desire clouds judgment. I found myself nodding. It felt good to listen, to be still. I returned the following week and the week after that. Soon, I was part of their core group, 8 of us, all under 30, all seeking something beyond notifications. We shared journals, meditated, and Cassandra led lengthy discussions about purity not just of the body, but of intention. Then, during a session titled Irreversible Devotion, she distributed pamphlets printed on thick, cream-colored paper. The title read, "The Final Sacrifice Securing Your Higher Path." I flipped through it slowly, my throat tightening. It was not metaphor. It was about sterilization voluntary procedures, a physical vow of unwavering focus, biological urges. The pamphlet stated, lead to compromise. True commitment demands permanence. I looked up. No one else seemed surprised. Cassandra met my gaze. This is not for everyone. She said gently, but leaders go first. My heart pounded. But this is permanent, I whispered. She nodded. So is clarity. That night, I barely slept, rereading the pamphlet, attempting to convince myself it was theoretical, a test. But the next day, she sent me a clinic address just for a consultation. You do not have to decide, she added. Today, I went. The clinic was clean, quiet. The nurse spoke softly, asking if I had any doubts. I inquired about reversibility. She offered a brochure on egg preservation, just in case. That made it worse. I left without scheduling an appointment. Cassandra texted that evening. Did it go well? You do not have to rush, but we believe in you. I did not reply. For 3 days, I remained silent, ceased attending meetings, and ignored her calls. I walked along the river, trying to remember who I was before all this. On the 4th day, I returned to the warehouse where we would first met. It was empty. A new flyer was taped to the door, sound bath, and somatic healing. Saturdays at 6. No mention of Cassandra. I never saw her again. I deleted the group chat, discarded the pin. I told my closest friend, and she held my hand as if afraid I might still return. Hey, okay, so I don't even know why I'm recording this. Maybe because I can't sleep. Maybe because my friends are tired of hearing about it. Or maybe because if I don't get this out of my head soon, I'm going to start romanticizing again. And I can't do that. Not with this one. So yeah, Maya, that was her name. We met on a Wednesday. I remember that because I was in my car, waiting for a voiceover job, eating cold fries from the bottom of the bag, swiping through dating profiles like they were scratch-off lottery tickets. I wasn't expecting anything. I sure as hell wasn't expecting her. Her profile was understated, not trying too hard. No bikini photos or inspirational quotes. Just a picture of her on a beach, a mango in one hand and a dog in the other. Her bio read looking for a good listener and someone who doesn't hate cilantro. I matched with her before I even realized ID swiped right. We started messaging that night. Nothing deep, just banter about food, bad burritos, and how she had never had one without rice. She asked why I'd chosen the taco place I'd listed in my bio, and I told her it was because they piled pickled onions onto everything, as if attempting to cleanse your sins. She laughed at that, saying she liked how I described things. After a few days of texting, we met at a Vietnamese spot. I always recommend a quiet place tucked into a strip mall, serving spring rolls that taste like they belong in a completely different city. She arrived in a white hoodie and jeans, her hair tied up, no makeup, or perhaps just the kind that looks like skin. She smiled as if she wasn't trying to impress me, simply saying, "Hey," and I liked that. We talked for hours. She told me she was a part-time translator, spoke 3 languages, owned a cat named Blue who hated music, and had grown up all over the place: Canada, Lebanon, New Zealand. She said she never really felt like she belonged anywhere. Something about her felt ethereal, as if she were present, but not quite present. I'm not sure that makes sense, but it did at the time. Our second date was a walk around a lake trail near my place. I'd never taken a date there before it felt personal. She wore headphones around her neck, but never put them in, saying she liked the feeling of them there. She told me she was into old buildings and survivalist documentaries. She made fun of me for not knowing what cardamom was. Afterward, we sat on a curb with tacos and watched a guy attempt to walk 4 dogs while drinking an iced coffee. One of the dogs sat down and refused to move. We laughed until we couldn't breathe. That was the moment I thought, okay, this could be something. The next couple times we hung out, it was more the same, easy, unforced. She never overshared, but she didn't hold back either. She was the kind of person who listened as if it were her job, but not in a way that made you feel studied, just seen. I didn't feel like I had to perform with her. I could just be. She'd sit across from me and ask these quiet, curious questions. What do you miss most about your childhood? Do you believe in good timing or just convenient people? That sort of thing. And then came the rooftop date. It was our 5th time hanging out. I think we were at this bar with string lights and overpriced cocktails, the kind of place where the sunset makes you feel like a main character. She was quiet that night, not sad, just somewhere else in her head. After a while, she turned to me and said, "Have you ever considered getting married early?" I laughed, thinking she was joking, and said something dumb like, next week, but she didn't laugh. She just looked at me, calm and still. And then she explained that her visa situation was complicated, that she was trying to stay in the country, to finish school, and keep her job. That marriage could be a practical solution. That she wasn't asking for money, romance, or even permanence, just stability, just a little time. And then she said, "I trust you." And honestly, that broke something open in me because I liked her. I wanted her. And for a few seconds, I thought, maybe this is what it means to really show up for someone. Maybe love isn't always fireworks. Maybe sometimes it's just paperwork and promises. But then I asked a question, the one that had been sitting in my throat like a pebble. How many people have you asked this? She looked away, took a sip of her drink. Then she said, "Just you." And that messed me up more than anything else. Because if it was a game, fine. If it was a scam, I'd get over it. But this just felt like being entrusted with a secret too heavy for one person to carry. I didn't give her an answer that night. We walked back to her place. She leaned into me as we crossed the street, like she didn't want to lose the moment before it dissolved. When we got to her door, she didn't kiss me. She just touched my sleeve and said, "You can think about it. I won't bring it up again unless you do." That night, I didn't sleep. My brain kept replaying every scene like a security camera I couldn't turn off. Was she playing me, or was she just surviving? A few days later, I texted her, saying we should talk. We met at a coffee shop with wobbly tables and too much sunlight. We sat in the corner. She had a tea she didn't touch. I had nothing in front of me, just my hands folded. I told her I wasn't in a place to do something like that I wasn't angry, but I couldn't keep dating her if that expectation was floating between us. She nodded the whole time, didn't flinch, just said, "I understand. I didn't mean to scare you. I just figured it was worth asking." We didn't text much after that. She didn't beg, I didn't chase. A week later, I saw her on the app again, new photos. Same quiet energy. I didn't swipe. I just sat there staring at her profile for a full minute before closing it. It's been a while now. I still think about her sometimes, not in a bitter way, just in that this really happened kind of way. Like I'm walking around with this little echo of a person I almost knew. And sometimes I wonder what I would have said if I didn't like her so much. If she hadn't made me feel something real before asking for something practical. Would I have said yes? Would I have helped her stay? Would I have ruined both of us by trying to blend love and logistics? I don't know. But I still hear her voice sometimes. I trust you. And that's what makes it hard, because for a brief moment, I think I trusted her, too. I matched with Sabrina on a dating app so glitchy it felt like it was trying to protect me from myself, you know the kind, where notifications arrive and burst like gunfire, profiles freeze mid-scroll, and half the time it resets your preferences without asking. I wasn't even seriously looking anymore, just tapping out of boredom like someone flipping channels on a broken TV. But Sabrina's profile caught me off guard. There was a blurry photo of her smiling, surrounded by what looked like children's artwork taped to a wall behind her. Her bio said she was a third-grade teacher, a pancake loyalist, and more curious than cautious. She had one of those quiet, warm energies you could feel even through a screen. Her, quote, kindness is a form of intelligence. I don't usually go for the overtly sweet types. Eve always been drawn to the chaos, not the calm, but something about her felt genuine. She texted in full sentences and seemed to mean every word. She messaged first, "What's your favorite smell?" I stared at the question for a full minute. It wasn't the usual opener, no. "Hey," or "What do you do?" Just straight to something oddly intimate. I replied the inside of a new book mixed with coffee. "Yours," she said, freshly washed hair. Also, rain on pavement before sunset. We were off to the races. Our first date was at a coffee shop that looked like it had been designed by an algorithm obsessed with reclaimed wood, an indie playlist, the kind of place where baristas wear beanies year-round, and the pastries are labeled by mood, not flavor. She walked in wearing an oversized denim jacket and a tote bag that said books. Boys. Her hair was tied up in a loose bun, and her eyes lit up when she spotted me. "You look exactly like someone who says thank you to the bus driver," she said, grinning. "I do," I replied. Every time. We sat at a corner table by a window that fogged slightly from the breath of the city outside. She ordered a honey oat latte and asked me what I would name a pet snail. I said Turbo, and she laughed so hard she snorted. It was high-pitched and surprising, like a hiccup in a symphony. I liked it. We walked around aimlessly afterward, talking about silly things, what superpower we'd want, which fruit has the most chaotic energy. She said passion fruit. I said durian. The date ended with a hug that was a little too long to be platonic, but not quite an invitation. I walked home grinning like a fool. The second date was even better. She suggested a tiny museum dedicated to packaging. History. I didn't even know that was a thing, but she was visibly excited about it, like a kid on a field trip. She pointed out vintage cereal boxes and waxed poetic about the evolution of toothpaste tubes. "I like things that don't pretend to be more than they are," she said, touching a 1950s ketchup bottle. "It's just ketchup. No marketing campaign trying to make it spiritual." Later, over tea, she texted me today it was a 9 out of 10. We should date again. I remember reading that and feeling my chest glow a little. By the third date, Shed started bringing this little clip-in microphone with her. It was pinned discreetly to the inside of her jacket, like something a TV host would wear. I asked about it, half joking, "What are you spying on me for?" She smiled. "I use it for note-taking. I'm working on a project." Sabrina was the kind of person who would record her thoughts on the fly. I figured maybe she was a writer, or trying to be one. She had that natural curiosity, always asking questions that felt like they came from a deeper place. What sound reminds you of home? Do you think sadness is more about memory or absence? I thought she was just emotionally intelligent, or maybe just thoughtful in a way I wasn't used to. We hung out 5 or 6 times. Once we had gas station snacks in the park and ranked the worst childhood snacks. Another time we people watched at the farmer's market and made up elaborate backstories for everyone who walked by. The more time we spent together, the more I liked her. She didn't try to impress me. She wasn't performative. When we kissed the first time, it was in the middle of a sentence, her sentence. She leaned in mid-thought, her lips meeting mine as if she had been planning it for days. It was not a fireworks display of a kiss. It was a low hum, a slow, growing warmth that left my hands hovering awkwardly at her waist before finally settling there. Her lips tasted faintly of cinnamon gum and black tea. She pulled away, a smile playing on her lips. I have been wanting to do that ever since you said you hated passion fruit, she confessed, her voice soft and slightly teasing. I laughed. That is what did it, that wrinkle in your eyebrows, she asked, her eyes crinkling at the corners. She stayed over that night. Nothing overtly romantic transpired. We spent the evening in lazy cuddling, watching bad documentaries with the volume muted almost to silence. But her body curved against mine with a familiarity that suggested a history, a pre-existing knowledge of how we fit together best. I recall waking around 300 a.m. to find her eyes open, gazing at the ceiling. I whispered, "You okay?" She nodded. "Yeah, just listening," she murmured. "Listening to what?" I asked. "Curious." She paused, considering her answer. "Everything," she finally whispered. At the time, I considered it poetic now. I understand she meant it quite literally. It was a week later when the message arrived, a link from a random guy I did not know, no mutual friends, no context. The link led to a Spotify podcast. The logo was a cartoon AP Bo wearing glasses. The title dates with strangers. I clicked, assuming it was a mistake. Then I saw the episode title Mr. Coffee Shop and His Emotional Armor. My stomach plummeted. I hit play. It was her voice, unmistakably Sabrina. The same cadence, the same infectious laugh. But this time, she was not speaking to me, she was speaking about me, narrating our first date as if reading a short story to an unseen audience. She described the coffee shop in meticulous detail, my worn hoodie, the way I cradled my mug in both hands, as if casting a spell. Then she played a clip of me, my own voice, discussing my dog, recounting childhood anecdotes about sleeping in my car to avoid going home. She termed it a quiet confession cloaked in humor. I sat frozen, a cold dread settling in my chest. I skipped forward, only to find things getting worse. She dissected my tone of voice, questioning whether my calm demeanor was a carefully constructed defense mechanism. She labeled me emotionally guarded but unexpectedly tender when distracted. There were other episodes, featuring other men, each given a whimsical nickname, each dissected with a mixture of humor and brutal honesty. She even played clips of their voices, not just summarizing their interactions, but using actual recordings of their real conversations. I texted her, a single word seriously. She did not respond for a full day. Then, a text arrived that is not personal. I anonymized everything. It is for a creative series. You came off really well. Really well. As if I were a character in a story she would written and was now attempting to reassure. I did not reply. I blocked her everywhere. For the following week, I obsessively checked the podcast page. She had not uploaded anything new, but the episode remained online. The comment section overflowed with reactions. Wow, he sounds sweet. Classic avoidant. Oof, this guy needs therapy. They discuss me as if I were fictional, a character in a narrative, not a real person with feelings. I stopped eating for a period, deleted the app, and threw myself into the gym and into books, seeking solace and distraction. I confided in one friend, who suggested I report her. But how? She had not broken any laws, not technically. But what she had undeniably broken was trust. She had taken our shared moments, our intimacy, and transformed them into consumable content. She had made me into a commodity, a voice to be dissected and analyzed. I met Owen at a friend's gallery opening one of those events where everyone pretends not to judge the art, but clearly does. He stood before a canvas that looked as if someone had dragged a dirty mop across it, nodding with feigned profundity. I quipped about it looking like depression in brushstrokes, and he turned to me, a grin spreading across his face. Exactly, he agreed. I laughed. You do not even know what I said. He grinned and shrugged. Does not matter. Felt true. That is how it began. We talked for almost an hour that evening, sharing our vulnerabilities. We discussed music that made us cry, our mutual inability, to keep houseplant alive, and that peculiar Sunday melancholy. He possessed a captivating way of maintaining eye contact, making you feel truly heard and seen. It was disarming. He asked for my number before I left, phrasing it as a question whose answer he already knew. I liked that. Our first date was at a bookstore cafe. He arrived in a denim jacket and a navy t-shirt that smelled faintly of cedar. He ordered an oat milk latte and posed a question, what are you most embarrassed of? I confessed my fondness for cheesy 80s karaoke ballads. He admitted his guilty pleasure for home renovation shows. Our honesty resonated, creating an immediate connection. We talked for 4 hours straight that day. He spoke about his work in user experience design, a field I did not fully comprehend, but his passion was evident. He spoke about it as if it truly mattered, expressing a deep concern for how people move through spaces, how they feel when they interact with objects. That is what stood out, his genuine concern for feelings, not just his own, but everyone's. He asked profound questions. What is your default defense mechanism? How do you know when someone's safe? What is something you have never admitted out loud? It felt as though we were carefully building something, stacking stones one upon the other, creating a solid foundation. On our second date, he presented me with a book, explaining that it reminded him of the way I spoke. He would underline a passage and dog-eared the page. The underlined passage spoke of wanting to be known without needing to explain oneself. I felt a sense of release, a quiet unlocking in my chest. We moved slowly, deliberately. There were thoughtful morning texts, lengthy evening phone calls. He encouraged me to send voice notes, saying he enjoyed the cadence of my thoughts, that it made him feel closer, as if I were present even when I was not physically there. It felt real, genuine. Our first kiss followed a collaborative effort, moving a heavy bookshelf I would purchase from Craigslist. Sweaty, laughing, slightly breathless, he leaned in, as if he had been waiting for the perfect, unpretentious moment. It was not the most romantic setting, but it was the most honest. His lips were soft, hesitant, like he was asking permission even as he kissed me. I liked that, too. We kept things quiet, not secretive, simply ours. He appreciated the slow pace, expressing a desire to avoid rushing and ruining things by making them performative. It sounded mature, thoughtful, so I agreed. And for a while, it felt effortless, until it was not. The first red flag did not look red at all. It was beige, neutral, almost imperceptible. He canceled the date at the last minute, citing a work emergency. Fine. But then it happened again and again, always at the last minute, always with vague explanations. I did not press initially, wanting to be understanding. I told myself he was overwhelmed, burnout, facing work deadlines, simply navigating life's complexities. But the distance grew, subtly yet steadily. Replies became slower. Calls went unanswered. Rescheduled dates were suggested with the limpness of emojis and short, hastily typed messages. The night everything shattered. I was at a bar with friends. One of them, Olivia, tapped my shoulder. Is not that your guy, she whispered, pointing toward the back of the room. Owen sat at a corner table, hand in hand with a woman who seemed to have stepped straight out of a wedding catalog. They were not just close, they were together, intimately familiar. I froze, feeling as if I were watching a movie scene I had not even auditioned for. They leaned in, sharing a light kiss. She laughed. He gently touched her cheek. My heart did not race, it stopped. I left without a word, overwhelmed by a suffocating wave of disbelief and hurt. I could not breathe, could not think. I got into a car and stared out the window, as if the city itself held some explanation, some solace. Later that night, I texted him on talk. He called immediately. His voice was soft, carefully measured. I can explain, he said, and he did. He told me he was engaged, that it was complicated, that they would have been together for a long time, but had grown apart, that they were on a sort of break, that he was not sure what he wanted and needed time to figure things out. And then, the crushing blow you helped me realize what I would have been missing. as if I were some kind of emotional litmus test. I did not yell, did not cry, I simply fell silent. How long will you even wait to tell me? I asked, my voice flat. I did not expect this to become real. He replied, I did not think I would feel this strongly. That is what people always say when caught in a lie, as if their feelings somehow absolved. The betrayal. I asked if his fiancée knew. He said no. So I was the experiment, the test drive, the emotional mirror he needed to examine himself to determine whether to stay or leave. And the worst part, I had felt something real. That was never the issue. The problem was that he would make me believe I was the only one feeling it. I ended it that night, telling him not to call, not to text, not to explain. I did not want apologies, did not crave closure. I just wanted out. But in the weeks that followed, I replayed everything, every tender look, every thoughtful message, every question that seemed to emanate from a place of genuine depth. And I wondered, was any of it real? Or was I merely a safe space for him to rehearse his exit strategy? A month later, I saw a post online, an engagement photo, her in a white dress, him in that same navy jacket. They looked happy. I stared at the screen for a long time, not because I missed him, but because I missed the us I thought we were building. I missed a version of him that existed only with me, the attentive listener, the observant man, the one who had inquired about my favorite sound and remembered a week later. I now understand that people can be two things at once. Owen was kind and selfish, present and dishonest, gentle and cowardly. He desired love but did not know how to earn it. I was never the ending, I was not even the beginning. I was the trial run, and I will never volunteer for that again. The first time I met Victoria, I thought she was someone I would conjure in my imagination. Not in some manic pixie dream girl fantasy. I am not 12, but in the sense that she entered a room and altered the atmosphere, as if tuned to a different frequency, and I was only just beginning to pick up the signal. She sat across from me at a candlelit bar in the Lower East Side, wearing a deep green wrap dress that made her appear as if she would step from a painting. Her hair was coiled high on her head, a few loose curls framing her cheekbones like punctuation marks. She smiled as if privy to some secret, as if she had already read the final page of my story and was simply waiting for me to catch up. We met on a Sunday night, which in itself felt significant. I remember thinking, no one agrees to a first date on a Sunday unless they are deeply sincere or quietly chaotic. It turned out she was both. What struck me immediately was her skill at asking questions, not superficial inquiries. She did not care about my profession or my fondness for dogs. She asked about my daydreams when sleep evaded me, my childhood aspirations before the world dulled them, my musings on the 5 seconds after death. And she listened, not the passive listening people employ while waiting for their turn to speak, but real listening, the kind that prompts you to reveal things you have not even admitted to yourself. Do you think you are more skilled at loving or being loved? She asked midway through the date, sipping her drink slowly, as if she already knew the answer. I said loving, and she nodded as if it confirmed a hunch. Most people would have made such a question feel like a trap, but with her, it felt like an invitation. By the end of the evening, I knew I wanted to see her again. Not because she dazzled or flirted or performed, but because she made me feel worthy of study. That should have been my first warning sign. Our second date was a stroll through the botanical garden. She wore loose linen pants and a white t-shirt with a faded graphic of cassette tape. She carried a flask of herbal tea, sharing it with me as if we were old friends on a porch swing. At one point, we sat beneath a tree, watching children chase a runaway balloon. She turned to me, her gaze piercing. Do you think you will ever be ready to be fully known by someone? I did not know how to respond. I attempted to laugh it off, but her unwavering gaze made it impossible, like she was holding up a mirror I would never seen before. I admitted my uncertainty. That is honest, she said. Most people would have said yes, just to sound brave. That was Victoria. She made you feel that uncertainty was a form of wisdom, that not knowing made you more, not less, worthy of love. By our fourth meeting, I sensed we were circling something not quite dating, not quite friends, a strange in-between that felt too deliberate to be casual. She texted at odd hours, posing questions like, "What color do you think your sadness would be? Or have you ever felt safe in silence?" I began keeping a note on my phone to record her inquiries, not because I thought they led anywhere, but because they made me feel more real, as if I were slowly unfolding before someone unafraid of what they might discover. Then came the evening at her apartment. It was small, filled with plants, incense, and books stacked like tectonic plates. She lit a candle before we sat down, explaining that it helped her anchor the space. I did not question what she meant. We talked for hours, laughing frequently. She recounted a story about being expelled from a silent meditation retreat for an overly enthusiastic sneeze. I confessed my tearful experience at a Coldplay concert, blaming it on allergies. At some point, the conversation slowed. She leaned in, her knee brushing mine, her hand lightly grazed my wrist, not possessively, but as if checking my pulse. We kissed. It was slow, deliberate. Her fingers curled into the back of my neck. For a moment, I forgot every bad date, every instance of being ghosted, breadcrumbed, or told I was too much for someone who did not know what they wanted. That kiss felt like being chosen. But afterward, she pulled back, studying me as if deciphering the fine print on my soul. "You are very open," she observed. "Is that a good thing?" "It is rare," she added, useful. I did not think much of it at the time, but in retrospect, the word useful should have given me pause. The unraveling began 3 weeks later. We were lying on her floor, heads resting on opposite ends of a yoga mat, sharing dried mangoes and discussing intimacy. She asked my opinion on polyamory. I said I respected it, but did not think I was suited for it. She nodded. "You are definitely a synchronizer," she stated. I blinked. "A what?" She smiled. "Synchronizer. It is one of the 10 profiles in emotional compatibility theory. You pair deeply. You are rhythm-based. You match energy instead of chasing it." I laughed. "Is that a real thing?" She turned, her softness almost masking the intensity behind her gaze. "I am a compatibility consultant," she revealed. I did not want to lead with that, because it makes people think I am judging them. I sat up, startled. "Wait, like a dating coach." She shook her head. "No, I study patterns. I help people understand how they connect emotionally. I work with therapists, couples, app developers. It is more analytical than romantic." I nodded slowly, tried to process the information. "So, you've been analyzing me this whole time." She hesitated. "I have been observing you. There is a difference." I remained silent, letting the sentence hang in the air like smoke. After a few seconds, she added, "I am working on a new model, a framework. I have been collecting real-world data from people you are dating, from people I am learning from." I exhaled sharply. "So, I am a case study." "No," she said gently. "You are a mirror. That is different." I stood, not angry, just disoriented. "I do not know what that means." She sat up, crossing her legs. "You are not a subject. You are a reflection. You are helping me test the vocabulary, the emotional sequences, but not in a cold way. I care deeply." "That does not make it better," I countered. "It makes it messy." "Yeah," she agreed. She reached out, touching my hand. "I did not lie to you." "No," I said, "but you did not tell the truth either." I left soon after, without slamming the door or raising my voice. I simply told her I needed space. She did not try to stop me. The next day, a voice memo arrived. "I know this feels manipulative. I understand that. But it was never about you being a project. It was about recognizing patterns. And you are the first person who made me question the whole system." I did not reply. I listened to that message a dozen times before deleting it. It has been a few months now. I still think about her. Not in the way you miss someone who broke your heart, but in the way you miss someone who made you finally feel like you made sense. I wonder if I will ever appear in her research as an example of a synchronizer, prone to early emotional bonding, valuing congruence over novelty. I hope not. Or maybe I hope I do. Maybe that means I mattered. I do not regret meeting her. I regret not asking more questions. I regret letting myself believe that being seen and being studied were the same thing. They are not. Being seen feels like sunlight on your skin. I was not actively trying to date. You know those in-between phases where everything feels like a shrug. That was me. I would just moved into a one-bedroom apartment with carpet that felt like Velcro, blinds that would not close properly, and a kitchen light that flickered like a malevolent spirit. My neighbor vacuumed every night at 100 a.m. as if it were a sacred ritual. I subsisted mainly on cereal, pretending it was a conscious lifestyle choice. One night, scrolling through a dating app, I kept deleting and reinstalling like a toxic ex. I was not looking for anything serious. I was not even looking for interesting, just something to distract me from the ominous clanking beneath my sink. That is when I saw Aiden's profile. His profile was not overly polished, a few selfies, nothing dramatic. One from a concert, another with a golden retriever that appeared too pristine to be truly his. He had a relaxed, approachable vibe, the kind of guy who probably made perfect scrambled eggs and wore sweatshirts that somehow looked effortlessly cool. His first message arrived an hour after we matched okay, but pineapple on pizza. Yes or no, I said yes. He replied risky. I like it. It was silly, simple, but it was the first time in a while someone had made me smile through the screen. We began talking frequently. He was funny, but in a quiet, understated way. Not the kind of guy who tries to dominate a conversation, more like the guy who whispers a joke that only you find hilarious. And somehow, that makes it mean more. He said he worked in sound editing for indie films. I did not fully grasp the details, but it sounded creative and subtly intriguing. He told me he would once accidentally lock himself inside a pet store. I confessed to being ejected from a marshmallow factory tour for touching a cooling tray. It was easy. Our first date was at a quirky bowling alley bar hybrid. The lighting was dim, the table sticky, and the music loud enough to make conversation a challenge. But we still laughed. He wore a hoodie that looked soft enough to sleep in, smelling faintly of laundry detergent and citrus. I liked that he did not seem to be trying to impress me. He simply was. Afterward, he texted you 8 tonight easy. It made no sense, but I liked it anyway. Over the next few weeks, we saw each other often. Not grand, dramatic dates, but relaxed, comfortable encounters, spontaneous grocery store trips. I YouTube binges on his couch, midnight cereal runs, and half-watch movies. I would stop by after work, and we would simply exist near each other quietly. I liked it. I liked him. He mentioned having a roommate. I did not give it much thought. Rent in the city was exorbitant, and every guy I would date either had roommates or pretended they did not. I never actually met her, though. He said she worked nights or was usually out with friends. That seemed plausible. I did not press, but then small details began to feel off. One night, brushing my teeth in his bathroom, I noticed 2 toothbrushes in the holder. One was clearly well used, not a spare or a guest brush. I casually inquired when I emerged, and he paused before saying, "Oh, that is my roommate's. She leaves it here sometimes." Okay. Odd, but okay. Another time, searching for a spoon, I opened a drawer and found several folded notes decorated with hearts. I did not read them, but I asked about them. He laughed and said, "We write each other silly things sometimes." Still strange, but I tried not to be the girl who transforms everything into a conspiracy. Then came the framed photographs on his bookshelf. Not just group photos, but shots of the 2 of them holding hands, laughing together. A snow globe from Paris, which he claimed was hers, but she just likes to leave it out. The signs were everywhere: her shampoo in the shower, her coat by the door, a necklace on the counter that he carefully moved aside, whispering, "Careful. She gets mad if that tangles." I did not want to jump to conclusions, but it was becoming increasingly difficult to pretend I did not notice the pattern. So, I asked directly, "Is your roommate your ex?" He did not hesitate. "Yeah. I mean, we broke up a few months ago, but we're still figuring things out." That sentence hit me like a bucket of ice water. I just stared at him. He looked at me as if I were being overly dramatic, as if I should be perfectly fine with this arrangement. "Does she know you are dating other people?" I asked. He shrugged. I talked to her about it. I left soon afterward. I did not create a scene. I simply told him I needed some fresh air. When I got home, I began replaying everything in my mind. Every instance where he insisted we hang out at his place. Every time his text replies were excessively delayed, even though I knew he was home. The time he casually remarked, "We are redoing the living room," as if it were still theirs. The next day, I sent him a lengthy message. I clarified that my anger was not rooted in his past, or the fact that he still lived with someone. My anger stemmed from his dishonesty, the way he allowed me to believe we were building something genuine, while concealing a significant portion of the truth. I told him I refused to be a secondary character in someone else's breakup. His reply was vague. He claimed he had not anticipated developing feelings, and believed he could compartmentalize his emotions more effectively. Compartmentalize, as if I were merely a file in a drawer, his life a storage unit, and I was just another box haphazardly labeled maybe. After that, I stopped talking to him. I did not block him, just muted him. A couple of weeks later, I received a message from an unknown number. It read, "I read everything. Thanks for being honest." I did not reply. A part of me felt sorry for his ex, another part wanted to divulge everything to her, yet another part recognized she likely already knew. It's peculiar how someone can make you feel seen one moment, then utterly invisible the next, as if your existence was real until it became inconvenient, until the truth drew too near. Reflecting on the situation, I believe the most painful aspect was not his continued cohabitation with his exit, was the feeling that we were building something meaningful. I let him into my life. I allowed myself to become comfortable, bringing snacks to his apartment and leaving my lip balm on his nightstand. I even memorized the way he pronounced banana, stretching it into a two-syllable word. I was fully invested, yet he remained emotionally distant, perhaps still entrenched in their shared apartment, perhaps trapped in a past he could not relinquish, or maybe simply too afraid of solitude. I do not know for sure, but I do know I was not the person he chose to be honest with, and that is sufficient reason for me to move on. I met Damien at a poetry reading I almost skipped. It was raining, a typical occurrence. It was one of those days where time felt sluggish, like wet cement. I was exhausted, emotionally frayed, and the last thing I desired was to stand around sipping box wine while strangers recited poems about their exes as if heartbreak were a newly discovered phenomenon. However, I attended primarily because I would promise my friend Leah, who was reading that evening, and also because a part of me always shows up, even when I would rather not. A reflex, perhaps. Damien was standing near the back when I arrived, tall and angular, dressed in a worn black sweater, and holding a small notebook as if it were a cigarette. He looked like someone who'd been emotionally devastated by a Sufjan Stevens album and never fully recovered. We made brief eye contact. He nodded, and I reciprocated. After Leah's reading, I stepped outside for some air, and he followed. We ended up talking under the awning for 20 minutes, mostly about writing, specifically the distinction between vulnerability and performance. He expressed his disdain for much contemporary poetry, claiming it weaponized trauma in a dishonest manner. I confessed my appreciation for any poetry that did not utilize ellipses like glitter. He laughed a genuine, pleasant laugh. I am pretentious. We exchanged numbers before I left. He texted me later that night. Today was gray, but you were not. I smiled, typed a reply, deleted it, then sent careful, "I am not always this legible." He responded with a winking emoji. No words. We began texting daily thereafter. It was not just small talk, we shared real things, stories, fragments, snippets of essays we had not yet written, memories that felt as though they still belonged to someone else. He sent me a playlist titled "For Walking at Night in Cities U." Mississippi. It was perfect. Our first date was at a used bookstore that also served tea. He wore a navy button-down shirt and smelled faintly of bergamot and something woodsy. We slowly browsed the aisles, pulling down books and reading lines we enjoyed each other. At one point, he handed me a well-worn copy of James Baldwin Giovanni's Room and said, "This is the loneliest book I have ever loved." I did not inquire about his meaning. I simply nodded because I understood the sentiment. We sat outside the shop afterward, sipping tea and watching the sky darken as evening approached. He asked about my writing. I explained that I had not published much recently, that I would become overly cautious and guarded. He looked at me and said, "You do not seem guarded. You seem precise." That single sentence unlocked something within me. With Damien, I felt finally permitted to be complicated, messy, a work in progress. He did not flinch when I discussed my panic attacks or my inexplicable crying fits in the frozen food aisle. He simply listened, asked questions, and never attempted to fix me. We started seeing each other regularly, late dinners, long walks, occasional sleepovers that were not focused on sex, but rather proximity. I would wake up to find him already writing in his notebook, his brow furrowed as if he were translating a dream. Once, I inquired about his writing subjects. "Everything," he replied, "whatever lingers." He occasionally shared excerpts vague, abstract, yet beautiful. He stated he was not yet ready to share much, that he was working on a longer project, a collection of essays. I did not pressure him. I was falling for him in that quiet, unnoticeable way that you do not realize until the scent is complete. There was no grand gesture, just a series of small moments, him tucking my hair behind my ear mid-sentence, his consistent remembrance of my favorite granola bars on hikes, the way he would rest his head on my shoulder when he could not sleep. It felt safe, real until it was not. It began with a sentence. A friend sent me a link to an online literary magazine, commenting, "This sounds like something you would write." I clicked the link. The essay was titled "The Woman" in the middle of the story. The author, Damien K. I froze. The first paragraph was almost verbatim a story I would told him on our third date about getting lost in a foreign city and stumbling upon a puppet show in an unfamiliar language. He would laugh when I recounted it, calling it the most accidentally poetic thing he would ever heard. Now, it was in print, slightly refined and stylized, but undeniably mine. I continued reading. The essay was not solely about the puppet show, it was about me, not by name, but through specific details of frozen food aisle crying, my ankle scar from a childhood bicycle accident, the line I would once uttered, half drunk, half serious, and the observation that some people want to be loved, and some people want to be known, and I am not sure we get both. He would use it as a concluding sentence. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. It was not simply that he would written about me, it was the act of doing so without my knowledge, taking my vulnerability and transforming it into content, appropriating my voice as his own. I did not text him immediately. I needed time to process the appropriate level of anger. When I finally reached out, I kept it concise. "Hey, I read your essay." He replied, "Swiftly was going to send it to you. It just went live." I waited. Nothing further. So I asked, "Did you think to ask me first?" His response, "It is not about you. It is about the idea of you." There is a difference. That is when my stomach churned. Because I would heard that before from men who sought to avoid accusations of plagiarism while simultaneously refusing to acknowledge their source, men who used inspiration as a shield. I called him. He answered on the second ring, sounding calm, as if he would anticipated this call. "I did not name you," he said. "I changed details. You used my words," I countered. "You used my life," I insisted. He paused. I thought you would be flattered. You said you wanted to be seen. I did not say I wanted to be published. I retorted. Silence. He exhaled. I write what I feel. That is all I have ever done. No, I said, you write what I feel. That is different. He did not respond. I hung up. In the weeks that followed, I awaited an apology that never arrived. Instead, I received more essays, more pieces published in obscure yet respectable journals. I read each one meticulously, like someone searching a crime scene for fingerprints, and I found in my metaphors, my grief, my stories rewritten, reframed, but undeniably mine. I began to feel hollowed out, as if I would have been mined. My voice, once something I protected like a candle in the wind, now echoed back at me in someone else's prose. I stopped writing for a time, unable to find a purpose. Every sentence felt like a risk, every paragraph a potential theft. And is not that the worst kind of betrayal, not the romantic kind, but the creative one, the kind where someone not only breaks your heart, but also borrows your soul and forgets to return it. Months later, I saw him at another reading. He was standing near the back again, same sweater, same notebook. When he saw me, he offered a small, cautious smile. I did not reciprocate. I walked past him and sat in the front row. During the QA, someone asked him what inspired his writing. He began to answer. People let me and I stood and left before he could finish the sentence. I have slowly begun writing again, privately. Not everything needs to be shared. I should have known from the first invitation. It was not a date, not really. Just a few of us meeting up at this wine bar. Super chill. You should come. Morgan sent the invite in a text message, replete with a dancing emoji and devoid of punctuation, somehow making it feel both casual and urgent. We would only exchange texts for a few days after matching on the app. Nothing intense, just easy banter, quick jokes, a shared appreciation for unusual snacks, and bizarre documentaries. I was not expecting fireworks, but I also was not expecting a group. Still, I said yes. I arrived at the venue, a dimly lit, somewhat upscale establishment with overpriced cheese plates and people who wore turtlenecks ironically. Morgan waved me over to a corner booth occupied by 5 other people. No name tags, no introductions, just a quick, "This is him," as if I were a surprise guest on a talk show. I sat down in the only vacant seat, which happened to be across from a man named Micah, who immediately asked if I would ever tried ayahuasca. Morgan seemed relaxed, sipping her orange wine and laughing with a man beside her, a fellow in a denim jacket who clearly knew how to wield a smirk. I attempted to participate, asking questions, listening, and smiling. But throughout the evening, I struggled to find my place. She did not really talk to me directly. She included me in her laughter, tossed me a comment here and there, enough to make me feel seen, but not enough to feel chosen. At the end of the night, she gave me a quick hug and said, "This was fun. Let us do it again." I told myself it was merely a casual first encounter, that perhaps she was shy, that this might be her method of easing into new relationships. I did not realize I was already losing the game. The next time we met, it was another group event, a trivia night at a bar that smelled of damp wood and fried pickles. This time, she introduced me to people by name and even offered to get me a drink progress. But then I noticed the same man from before, the denim jacket, was present again, this time seated beside her, their knees touching under the table. She laughed at his jokes before he even finished them. I tried to avoid overanalyzing the situation. Perhaps they were friends. Perhaps she was simply flirtatious. Perhaps I was being insecure. I continued to show up game nights, picnics, birthday celebrations for people I did not know once, even a movie night where they watched an obscure horror film in someone's backyard and shared a single bottle of mezcal, as if it were communion. I was always invited, never alone, and always he was there, too. His name was Reed. He possessed a subtle charm that made me feel as though I was trying too hard in comparison. He played guitar, but did not discuss it. His profession was vaguely described as creative strategy. He wore rings. Morgan always seemed energized around him, not drunk, but alive, as if she were tuned to a different frequency when he was near. I waited for a clue, a clear indication of whether this was worth pursuing. She never provided one, but she continued texting me, inviting me, responding with, "OMG, yes, and you are the funniest, and I am so glad you came." It was just enough to maintain hope. Then came the night that shattered everything. She invited me to a casual dinner at her place, stating it was just a few friends. I arrived with wine and a poorly rehearsed joke. She opened the door barefoot, wearing a large sweater and leggings, her hair in a messy bun that seemed too perfect to be accidental. There were 7 people there, none of whom I knew. Reed, of course, was already on the couch, legs crossed, sipping from a mug as if he lived there. I sat in the corner of the room, smiling, nodding, asking the usual get-to-know-you questions. Then, during dinner chickpea stew and crusty bread, someone offered a toast. A woman with pink hair raised her glass and spoke of Morgan's bravery for finally saying something. Everyone clinked glasses. Morgan blushed. I did not understand. Later, in the kitchen, I asked her what was the toast about. She looked at me, her eyes flickering. "Oh, nothing. Just some drama," she replied. I waited. She sighed. I told Reed how I felt, that I liked him. She explained. I nodded slowly and she smiled. He said he needed time to figure things out, but he did not say no. She continued. I stood there holding an empty glass, my heart sinking. She touched my arm. "I am so glad you came tonight, though," she said. I did not know what to say. I left early. She gave me a Tupperware container of leftovers, as if that made it okay. On the walk home, everything clicked: the group dates, the carefully casual demeanor, the way she always ensured Reed was present when I was, the way she laughed louder and touched her hair more when he was in the room. I was not the date, I was the decoy, the person she used to pique his interest, to create tension, to make herself seem desirable. I was the pawn, and once I saw it, I could not unsee it. I stopped responding to her texts. She sent one a week later: "Missed you at game night. Hope everything's okay." I did not answer. She did not try again, and that told me everything. I do not think she intended to hurt me. I think she was simply caught up in her own drama, attempting to create a love story out of thin air, using the people around her as props. But I was not a prop, I was a person, and I deserved more than to be someone else's plot device. It began like every other match I should not have trusted. Claire messaged me within 10 minutes of matching. Normally, that would have felt overly eager, but her first message was not flirtatious, it was specific. "You mentioned you love the band Low Roar. What is your favorite album, and why is not at 0? I laughed. It was an inside baseball question, the kind only someone who genuinely listens would ask. I replied with a paragraph about how once in a long. Long while is underrated, and 2 minutes later, she sent back a voice note agreeing with me. Her voice was soft, deliberate, like someone who thought before speaking. She had a slight rasp at the end of her sentences that made everything sound like a secret. I played it twice. We messaged all day. She referenced books I would mention in old public posts, ones I would forgotten I would even discussed. She joked about my favorite directors, quoted one of my tweets back to me slightly embarrassing, and said she would always wanted to meet someone who understood melancholy that does not need to be fixed. I should have paused there, but I did not. Instead, I thought, finally, someone who gets it. Our first date was at a bookstore cafe. She wore dark jeans, a gray wool coat, and no makeup that I could detect. Her hair was tucked into her collar, and she smelled like cardamom and something faintly citrusy. When she hugged me hello, her body was warm, firm, and real. We sat in the corner by the window. She ordered an espresso and a copy of Ocean Vuong's On Earth, We Are Briefly Gorgeous. I joked that she was trying too hard to impress me. She said no. I just like when people feel seen. We talked about everything childhood, movies, The strange tension in being both analytical and romantic. She told me she liked the way my mind worked, that she would never met someone who paused mid-sentence to find the right metaphor. She said it as if it were rare, as if I were rare. That was the first time I sensed something amiss, but the feeling passed. The next few dates were equally smooth to smooth. She mentioned a short story I would once published in a niche literary magazine, stating it made her cry. She knew my favorite tea brand. She curated a playlist that included a song I would once refer to as the sound of my grief. I did not even remember saying that. I asked how she knew. She smiled and said, "I pay attention." And I wanted to believe that. I truly did, because she made it so easy. She laughed at the right moments, grew quiet when I needed space, touched my wrist when I was spiraling during a story. Once, when I was discussing my mother's health, she simply reached over and held my hand without saying anything. It felt as if she knew me, but at some point, I realized I did not know her. Not really. She told me superficial things, that she worked in digital marketing, that she had a dog named Luca, that she was an only child. But there were no stories, no messy, unplanned tangents, no accidental revelations. It was as if every sentence had been meticulously edited. It was a Tuesday night when it began to unravel. We were at her apartment, sleek, minimalist, all neutrals. Everything smelled of lavender and vanilla. I was searching for a charger and opened the wrong drawer. Inside were printed pages, dozens of them. Some are articles. Others were my tweets and Medium posts. A few were screenshots of old bios from websites where I would have been listed as a guest speaker. One was a transcript of a podcast I would have been on 3 years earlier. It was a dossier. I stood there, holding one of the pages, motionless. She walked in, saw me and froze. I did not speak immediately, just held up the paper. She set down her mug and said, "I can explain." I forced a laugh. "I would like that," I said. She sat on the edge of the couch cautiously, as if one wrong move might shatter the room. "I do backgrounding for a living," she explained. "Brand research, reputation management. It is part of my job to know things. I guess I just could not turn it off." I said nothing. She added, "You are very searchable and very consistent. That is rare." That word again, rare. She said she would look me up after our first date, that she was curious, that she wanted to understand me before investing her time, that she did not want to waste either of our energy on something without potential. So she studied me, and then she mirrored me. I asked her directly, "Will you ever just yourself with me?" She looked up. Her eyes were glassy, but not wet. "I do not know," she said, and that was the most honest thing she would said, because the truth is, I do not think she meant to manipulate me. I think she was trying to be what she thought I needed. I think she believed that if she reflected me back perfectly, I would finally feel at home. But people are not mirrors, they are windows or doors or mazes. And I wanted to walk through her, not see myself in her. I left that night without a fight, no shouting, no accusations, just silence. She texted me 2 days later, "I did not mean to hurt you. I just did not know how else to connect." I did not reply because I did not know what would have been real anymore. Was she drawn to me or to the version of me she would studied and memorized? Did she love my stories or the way they made her seem more compatible? Did I fall for her or for the version of myself she projected back onto me? I still think about her sometimes, in quiet moments when I am listening to music she once sent me, or when I read a line in a book that sounds like something she would have underlined. And I wonder if we would have met by accident. If she had not known anything about me, would we still have connected? Or was a connection just a trick of the light? A mirror placed at the right angle, reflecting back the person I already believed I was. Okay, so I met this cute guy on Tinder. Everything seemed to be going well while messaging, so I decided to take the bus over one evening to hang out with him. I lived in a reasonably sized college town, so public transportation was commonplace. It sounded like a good idea in theory. Yes, wrong. I have irritable bowel syndrome IBS and an anxiety disorder. We all know where this is going. Ladies, you know the feeling. When you are on your way to see a guy and your stomach is twisting into knots and you are debating whether to cancel, why do we do this to ourselves? Unfortunately for me, this feeling hit while I was already on the bus. The awful stomach ache and anxiety started to creep in. Bubble guts ensued. I told myself, no problem. I will quickly hop off the bus to stop at a convenience store. Only minor problem. I realized we were already in the suburbs, and I was only 5 minutes from his house. I had to accept my fate. By the time I got off the bus, I was doubled over in pain, trying to prevent, from escaping my body. I ended up practically running to his house to try and save my favorite American Eagle jeans. I greeted him and politely asked to use the restroom. I turned on the faucet to try, and I was experiencing the most excruciating intestinal distress of my life, the kind that drowns out any other sound, even the roar of a running faucet. My stomach was so violently upset that I was also projectile vomiting, a cacophony that completely overshadowed any attempt at masking the noise. It was clear the running water was not concealing anything. I would resign myself to the embarrassing reality here I was, in a very attractive man's bathroom, causing utter devastation. My escape plan involved blaming it on food poisoning and spending the evening engrossed in movies on his couch. I was meticulously crafting this narrative when I went to flush the toilet. And then the unthinkable happened. I clogged the toilet. In my entire life, I had never clogged a toilet. And, of course, it had to happen at that precise moment. So, I did what any sensible person would do under the circumstances. I left. I quietly lowered the toilet seat, summoned an Uber, washed my hands, and departed. I told him I would be right back. The instant I left his house, I blocked him on every platform. 3 years later, I still feel mortified and ashamed. This poor guy had to contend with that entire mess and unclog his own toilet, all while simply trying to have a you-know. It began with a snake emoji. That is what he sent after I commented on his profile bio. It read Snake Dad, terrarium engineer, cold-blooded friends only. I initially dismissed it as a joke, or perhaps ironic. His photos did not exactly scream exotic pet enthusiast. He looked more like a barista or a plant shop owner's soft flannel shirt. Sleepy eyes, a fern leaf tattoo adorning his wrist. We connected on a Sunday evening. He introduced himself as Ezra. He was 31, a freelance illustrator, and lived about 15 minutes away. He sent a picture of his studio, a spare bedroom featuring 3 bookshelves and a large glass terrarium in the corner. She is shy, he explained, referring to the snake, but she is good company. I was not sure how to respond. I have never been a fan of snakes, but I attempted to maintain an open mind. People keep all sorts of pets. I reasoned that if he was responsible and gentle with it, it was merely an unusual detail. He inquired about getting a drink later that week, and I agreed. We met at a bar near my apartment. It had low lighting, excellent cocktails, and a quiet atmosphere conducive to conversation. He arrived wearing a canvas jacket and a crossbody bag. Nice to finally meet you. He greeted me with a smile, then proceeded to open his bag. Inside, nestled in a clear plastic container with ventilation holes, was a small, pale corn snake with rust-colored markings. "This is Naga," he announced, as if introducing a friend. I laughed, thinking it was a joke. It was not. He placed the container on the table. "She gets anxious when she is alone for too long," he explained. "But do not worry, she is secure." The bartender gave us a double take. I tried to maintain a semblance of normalcy. We ordered drinks, and I concentrated on the conversation. He was engaging, albeit in a rambling, intense manner. He discussed Greek mythology, reptile heating lamps, and his past project of designing a tarot deck based on venomous animals. I nodded, sipped my drink, and tried to avoid looking at the snake. When he offered to let me feed Naga, I politely declined. He teased me, claiming I was emotionally distant. I laughed uncomfortably. When the bill arrived, he insisted on paying. I explained that I needed to be home early the following morning. He then invited me back to his place for a brief visit. Just for a minute, he said. Naga likes new people. I declined his offer. He did not press the issue, but his smile faded. Maybe next time, he said. I walked home, half amused by the strangeness of the evening. Later that night, he texted, "You have good energy. Naga was calm around you. That is rare." I did not reply. The next morning, he sent another message. "I had a dream you were holding her. She wrapped around your wrist like a bracelet." I muted the conversation. 2 days later, I returned home from work to find him standing on my porch, carrying the same crossbody bag. I froze. He waved. "I think Naga escaped," he announced. I blinked, confused. "What?" I asked. "I was cleaning her tank, and she slipped out." "I think she might have followed your scent," he explained. I stared at him, dumbfounded. "She is really smart," he added. "They can track heat and pheromones." I took a deep breath. "Ezra, you can't just show up at my house," I stated firmly. He looked confused, perhaps hurt. "I thought you would want to help," he said. "I do not," I responded firmly. "You need to leave." He remained motionless. I retrieved my phone. He saw this and stepped back. Okay. No need to call anyone," he conceded. "I just thought you thought wrong," I interrupted. He walked away, muttering about people being closed off. I locked the door, closed the blinds, sat on the floor, and attempted to calm my racing heart. That evening, I texted a friend, recounting the entire ordeal. She advised me to report him, but I hesitated. I wanted to believe it was a bizarre misunderstanding, and that he would leave me alone. However, the following morning, I discovered a note tucked under my windshield wiper. "She still has not come home. I think she is with you." I reported the incident. The officer raised an eyebrow when I explained the situation. "A snake?" he questioned. "Yes," I confirmed, "but it is not about the snake." They filed a report. The next day, I found a shed snakeskin on my doorstep. I purchased a security camera. Ezra never returned. I still do not know if Naga ever truly existed. Maybe she did, maybe she did not, but I still check under my bed before I go to sleep. His name was Cade. We connected on Snapchat's dating feature, something I typically avoided. But that night, I was bored, idly scrolling while half watching a show. His Bitmoji seemed unremarkable enough: baseball cap, hoodie, tired eyes. His profile was sparse, simply stating painter, music addict, looking for someone who does not flake. I should have recognized that last part as a red flag. We exchanged a few snaps. He was always quick to respond to my messages. He frequently used filters, dog ears, sunglasses, voice changers. It annoyed me, but I dismissed it as harmless. He repeatedly requested selfies, and I sent a few, nothing overtly revealing. He showered me with compliments, but in a way that felt unsettling. "You look soft, like I could pick you up," he wrote. "You would be easy to fold into my arms. I bet you smell like vanilla or coconut." It was not overtly vulgar, but it sent shivers down my spine. When I did not respond promptly, he would bombard me with a flurry of messages. "You there? Do not ignore me." I expressed my discomfort with his pushiness and the fact that I barely knew him. His responses were instantaneous, reiterating his disinterest in my lack of engagement. I blocked him. That should have been the end of it. It was not. The next day, I received a friend request on another platform from an anonymous account with no profile picture. I declined it. That night, a snap arrived from a new username, a variation on his name, followed by more and more variations. Each one was promptly blocked. I began locking my Snapchat settings, made my location private, and alerted my close friends to watch for anything unusual. I changed my profile picture and username. Then I tried to forget about him. 2 weeks later, I went to my best friend Jess's house for a sleepover tradition since high school movies, snacks, and late night conversations. Her parents were out of town, and it was just the two of us curled up in her basement with popcorn and face masks. Around midnight, I went upstairs to get more soda. That is when I saw it, a shadow outside the glass door. Initially, I thought it was a tree, but then it moved. I froze. A man stood on the patio, wearing a hoodie and a plain white mask, resembling a generic Halloween prop. His hands were pressed against the glass, watching me. I whispered to Jess, who came upstairs and gasped at the sight. We turned off the lights, moved away from the door, and Jess retrieved her dad's old baseball bat from the closet. I called 911. While we waited, we cautiously peeked again. He was still there, holding something up to the window, a phone with Snapchat open, displaying my profile picture, username, and a message typed on the screen should not have blocked me. Jess's dad arrived home 10 minutes early from a trip. Upon seeing the man on the patio, he stormed out the front door, circled around, and tackled him, holding him down until the police arrived. It was Cade. He had 3 phones, a knife, a collection of printed photos, screenshots from my stories, my selfies, even my Bitmoji. He would located Jess's address through a tag location from a post I would made weeks earlier. He never explained why he wore the mask. Perhaps he thought it made him unrecognizable, or maybe he believed it made him seem more menacing. He was arrested that night for trespassing, stalking, and unlawful surveillance. His Snapchat accounts were reported and deleted, and his devices were confiscated. I gave a statement and obtained protection order, but for weeks afterward, I could not sleep. I kept staring at my phone, wondering how many times I would inadvertently share too much information, a photo of a smoothie with a cafe tag, a sunset picture from my bedroom window, the background a mirror selfie revealing my mailbox. He would meticulously piece it all together, one snap at a time. I met Damien at a poetry reading I almost did not attend. It was raining, a typical downpour on one of those days when time felt heavy and sluggish. I was exhausted and emotionally drained, and the last thing I wanted to do was stand around sipping cheap wine while strangers recited poems about their exes as if they would personally invented heartbreak. But I went primarily because I would promise my friend Leah, who was reading that night. Also, there is a part of me that always shows up even when I do not want a reflexive action, perhaps. Damien was standing near the back when I arrived, tall and angular, wearing a worn black sweater and holding a small notebook as if it were a cigarette. He looked like someone who'd been emotionally devastated by a Sufjan Stevens album and never fully recovered. Our eyes met briefly. He nodded. I nodded back. After Leah's reading, I stepped outside for some fresh air, and he followed me. We ended up talking under the awning for 20 minutes, mostly about writing the distinction between vulnerability and performance. He confessed his dislike for much of contemporary poetry, feeling it weaponized trauma in an inauthentic way. I share my appreciation for any poetry that did not employ ellipses like glitter. He laughed a genuine, unpretentious laugh. We exchanged numbers before I left. He texted me later that night today was gray, but you were not. I smiled, typed, and deleted a response, then finally replied careful. I am not always this legible. He sent back a winking emoji. No words. We began texting every day after that. It was not just small talk, we shared real thing stories, fragments, snippets of essays we had not yet written, memories that felt like they belonged to someone else. He sent me a playlist titled For Walking at Night in Cities. You Mississippi. It was perfect. Our first date was at a used bookshop that also served tea. He wore a navy button-down shirt and smelled faintly of bergamot and something woodsy. We slowly browsed the aisles, pulling down books and reading lines aloud to each other. At one point, he handed me a well-worn copy of James Baldwin Giovanni's Room and said, "This is the loneliest book I have ever loved." I did not inquire about his meaning. I simply nodded because I understood the sentiment. We sat on a bench outside the shop afterward. sipping tea and watching the sky darken into evening. He asked about my writing. I confessed that I had not published much lately, that I would become overly cautious and guarded. He looked at me and said, "You do not seem guarded. You seem precise." That single sentence unlocked something within me. With Damien, I felt like I was finally allowed to be complicated, messy, and a work in progress. He did not flinch when I shared my struggles with panic attacks or my inexplicable fits of crying in the frozen food aisle. He simply listened, asked questions, and never attempted to fix me. We began seeing each other regularly: late dinners, long walks, occasional sleepovers that were not primarily about sex, but rather about closeness. I would wake up to find him already writing in his notebook, his brow furrowed as if he were deciphering a dream. Once, I asked him what he wrote about. "Everything," he replied, "whatever lingers." He occasionally read me snippets of his work, vague, abstract, but beautiful. He explained that he was not ready to share much yet, that he was working on something longer, a collection of essays. I did not push. I was falling for him in that quiet, unnoticeable way until I realized I would already fallen. There was no grand, dramatic moment, just a series of small gestures and gently tucking my hair behind my ear mid-sentence, remembering my favorite granola bars on hikes, resting his head on my shoulder when he could not sleep. It felt safe. It felt real until it was not. It began with a single sentence. A friend sent me a link to an online literary magazine, saying, "This sounds like something you would write." I clicked the link. The essay was titled "The Woman in the Middle of the Story," the author Damien K. I froze. The first paragraph was almost verbatim a story I would told him on our third date about getting lost in a foreign city and ending up at a puppet show in a language I did not understand. He would laugh when I recounted it, calling it the most accidentally poetic thing he would ever heard. Now it was in print, slightly refined and stylized, but undeniably mine. I continued reading. The essay was not just about the puppet show. It was about me, not by name, but by specific details of crying in the frozen food aisle, the ankle scar from a childhood bike accident, the line I would once uttered half drunk, half serious, that some people want to be loved and some people want to be known. And I am not sure we get both. He would use it as a concluding sentence. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. It was not simply that he would written about me, it was that he would done so without my knowledge or consent. He would take my vulnerability and transformed it into content, using my voice as his own. I did not text him immediately. I needed time to process the anger I felt. When I finally contacted him, I kept it brief. "Hey, I read your essay." He replied, "Swiftly was going to send it to you. It just went live." I waited. Nothing further. So I asked, "Did you think to ask me first?" His response, "It is not about you. It is about the idea of you. There is a difference." That is when my stomach churned. Because I would heard that excuse before from men who did not want to be accused of plagiarism, but also did not want to give credit where it was due, men who used inspiration as a shield. I called him. He answered on the second ring, sounding calm, as if he would anticipated this call. "I did not name you," he claimed. "I changed details. You used my words," I countered. "You used my life," I corrected. He paused. "I thought you would be flattered," he said. "You said you wanted to be seen." I did not say I wanted to be published. I retorted. Silence. He exhaled. "I write what I feel," he said. "That is all I have ever done." "No," I said. "You write what I feel. That is different." He did not respond. I hung up. In the weeks that followed, I awaited an apology that never came. Instead, I found more essays, more pieces published in obscure yet respectable journals. I read each one meticulously, searching for fingerprints, and I found them. My metaphors, my grief, my stories rewritten, reframed, yet undeniably mine. I began to feel hollowed out, as if my mind had been plundered. My voice, once something I guarded carefully, now echoed back at me in someone else's prose. I stopped writing for a while. I could not find a reason to continue. Every sentence felt like a risk, every paragraph a potential theft. And is not that the worst kind of betrayal, not the romantic kind, but the creative one, the kind where someone does not just break your heart, but borrows your soul and forgets to return it. Months later, I saw him at another poetry reading. He was standing near the back again, same sweater, same notebook. When he saw me, he offered a small, cautious smile. I did not reciprocate. I walked past him and sat in the front row. During the QA, someone asked him what inspired his writing. He answered, "People who let me in." I stood and left before he could finish the sentence. I have slowly begun writing again, privately. Not everything needs to be shared.